across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Mark Dolan. You were listening to Talk, the home of common sense. In for the brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer, and where to start? Gotcha! Argentina do a number on England, and as a nation mourns yet another lost opportunity to lift the World Cup, should the manager go? What do we think? Did Tuchel mess up? Meanwhile, the United Kingdom gets a new gaffer in Andy Burnham as he's preparing his squad for power, with Shabana Mahmood reportedly leaving the Home Office and going into number 11 as Chancellor. Does this mean that Burnham will be softer on immigration in order to please those left-wing Labour MPs? Meanwhile, Ed Miliband is expected to become Foreign Secretary. Does that spell the end for Britain's net zero experiment? And we're told that the former Greater Manchester Mayor is ready to ask the public to pay ever higher taxes in order to fund a socialist spending spree. So my question to you this morning at 3 minutes past 10 is a simple one. Will Burnham break Britain? Can the country afford this man in number 10? I don't know, so you've got to help me. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Kieran is taking your calls today. The brilliant Mark is pressing the buttons. The amazing Ted is the executive producer and directing our TV output, Jana. So if you want to see the show, head over to YouTube, search Talk, and up we pop. Live in the studio, I'm delighted to welcome the political editor of The Critic, Henry Hill. Good morning, Henry.
Good morning.
Or is it a good morning? Because there is a theme emerging here, whether it's on the football pitch or in number 10, a lack of leadership.
It was crushing, wasn't it? I mean, the terrible thing is, as you may know, I'm not a massive football person. I'm very much one of those, like, World Cup is about it for me. And even I knew, oh no, don't do that thing where you just start playing incredibly defensively against an incredibly aggressive team with an like, if I know this, there are things in the ocean that the sun never reaches that know this. And yet apparently the manager doesn't know it.
Yeah.
And it's baffling.
You're so right. I think the only positive of England not winning last night, and there aren't many, is we've avoided the Sir Keir Starmer congratulatory tweet at lifting the cup. And we've also avoided Andy Burnham capitalising on it and saying, you see, I'm Prime Minister and we've already won the World Cup.
I mean, I suppose so. It's an interesting question about whether or not there would actually be an uplift.
There would have been articles in The Guardian about a golden new era for the country. What a coincidence. Andy Burnham's come in and we've lifted the World Cup.
I think as patriots, it's our responsibility to cheer for the England team, even if a Labour Prime Minister might get to say something nice about it. But actually, the origin of this idea that there would be a big political uplift from the World Cup is actually just Harold Wilson whinging that if England had won a competition they didn't win, he might have done better. And so I don't know how much it's actually true, because voters will obviously come back to the cost of living crisis and higher taxes and everything else. But no, it was heart-wrenching, to be honest.
It was. And before we get on to the important issue of politics, what about the gaffer? Should he go? Thomas Tuchel, £8 million a year, I'm told.
I suppose my first thing would just be I just want an explanation, right? Because I don't know enough about. And it's very easy for somebody like me, and I'm always conscious of this as a commentator who doesn't have an important technical job, to be like, well, I reckon they should do this, that, and the other, and it's really obvious what they should do.
It's never stopped me. Don't knock it till you've tried it.
I really just
armchair expert.
I would absolutely just want to know from him what he was thinking, right? Because if he seems to be doing well for some of the other games. Maybe I don't know enough about football to know, but my suspicion is England has done this so many times, right? So many times in competitions, it has gone out the same way. It's had that same critical failure of nerve. And it's like, if you can't learn from that history, what are you bringing to the table?
Well, are we a semi-final team? Do we need to just accept our place in the football hierarchy? And are there parallels with the country? Does Britain think it's better than it is?
I mean, honestly, I reckon...
Are we a mid-table nation?
I reckon the year that we accepted that we were a semi-final team is the year we'd win. Because that... No, seriously, because that sports psychology is incredibly important, and that pressure... If you were like, no, we're a semi-final team, we've made it to a semi-final, just play your hearts out, boys, we've done what we needed to do, that would be a completely different England team to the one that we eventually got. And I reckon they'd do better.
Well, Britain is going to get a new gaffer in Andy Burnham, and he's ready to ask the British people to pay higher taxes. Be afraid, be very afraid.
Yeah, and you know, I was going to say the worst thing, but he's going to ask to pay a bit more, right? This is the way he's phrased it. This phrase cutesy, a bit more. And I think a bit more is not going to do anything, right? Even if you and I, on the right, support lower taxes, but even if you're a lefty and you support higher taxes, structurally, you would need much higher taxes. There was a new report out the other day, being like, okay, if you wanted a European level of spending, how much tax would Britain need to pay? It's a lot more tax, and it's a lot more tax on average earners. I don't think that's what Andy Burnham's talking about. Andy Burnham is like Sir Keir Starmer. He's going to try and find a couple of wheezers, a couple of easy targets, landlords, very high earners, and he's going to try and squeeze more money out of them. It's not going to work, because those groups are very, very sensitive and they're not big enough. It's not going to generate enough revenue, but it is going to suck a little bit more juice out of the economy.
And what about Burnham in number 10? Will we be surprised by his performance? Could we be underestimating Burnham?
Well, we could be. Any number of things is possible.
Because it's a great unknown, isn't it?
Well, it's not that unknown. He was a not particularly good minister, which is why he failed in his first leadership bid. And his role at Manchester Mayor is mostly symbolic and representational. The really gritty work that's made Manchester what it is was done by Sir Richard Lees and other people on the council side of the question. Now, I think the single biggest contra-indicator for the health of the Burnham government is the fact they're already briefing against each other. You'll have seen this, was it yesterday when you had, or the day before when you had the allies of Andy Burnham are saying they think they've done enough to stop Ed Miliband becoming Chancellor. And it's like, you're not even in yet. If you're already trying to bounce your boss into a decision by leaking to the press, that is a terrible sign. Take it from the Conservatives. We're very familiar with this process. That normally starts happening once you're losing.
You are right about that, and it's not a good sign, is it? Well, I think he's a preening narcissist, Andy Burnham, and I think he'll be found out in office within days, and I think that he will accelerate our national decline. There will not be a Labour government at the next election. My problem is, will there be a United Kingdom? Henry, let's talk specifics. Let's get down to brass tacks. Can we talk about immigration? Shabana Mahmood likely to leave the Home Office, one of the few effective ministers in this government. Does this send a signal that Burnham is going to be softer on immigration?
Probably. This is the problem with our sort of attention deficit political cycle now, right? Because Shabana Mahmood is an effective Secretary of State, at least relative to other members of the Labour government. But on the other hand, she's never left in post long enough to do anything, right?
Yeah.
So she was in Justice, and she did some good work on prisons, not nearly enough to solve the prisons crisis, but she'd started to do some good work on prisons. So she immediately gets moved to the Home Office, and now Labour is having to talk about letting people out of prison, because of course the prisons crisis isn't solved. Then she starts to do some good, controversial in Labour circles, work on immigration. And so it's like, well, what are we going to do now? What's the next thing? We're going to make her Chancellor. I do think it will almost certainly mean that her immigration reforms get watered down. She's basically the only person in the cabinet who really supports
and these reforms are outstanding, and this show and this station is not an echo chamber. If Labour do good things, I will congratulate them. And for those that might have forgotten, Shabana Mahmood, outgoing Home Secretary, has decided to double the length of time that you qualify for indefinite leave to remain based upon 3 criteria: an excellent command of the English language, the absence of a criminal record, and you must be economically productive. Fantastic policies. Burnham moves her out, and all of that is undone.
And the thing is...
This is not a good omen, Henry.
It's not a good omen.
And you come in this morning, you're trying to cheer me up with your sunny demeanour and that little twinkle in your eye.
I'm doing my best.
But this isn't working.
So the terrible thing is, even if Shabana Mahmood turned out to be a brilliant Chancellor, and there's actually not much evidence that she's thought much about economic policy.
She doesn't want the job.
She couldn't save more money than she is saving with her ILR reforms. Like, it's tens of billions in welfare payments.
Any Chancellor would love that policy.
Exactly, right? You'd think so. Maybe that's how this works, right? Chancellor, most powerful position in government. You get to control every other department's purse strings. Maybe there's a 4D chess world where Shabana Mahmood is suddenly like, well, actually, departments that don't subscribe to the new all-government anti-immigration plan don't get any money. Maybe, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I think it's a real worry, and it's my understanding that Shabana Mahmood wanted to stay in the Home Office. So not only are we likely going to see a softer position on immigration, which the country and our society can ill afford, we're likely to see political chaos too, because you've got government ministers that are being given jobs that they don't want.
I mean, and you know, Ed Miliband.
This is a hot mess.
Ed Miliband won't have wanted to move from the environment either. And sometimes it's a sign of strength when
I'd like to remove him from the environment. I put him on a Caribbean island at taxpayers' expense.
I mean, you know, there are worse fates, right? But I think
Imagine Ed Miliband in a grass skirt, but that's another story.
it's too early in the morning. It's too early in the morning to drop that kind of thing on people. Look, to some extent, it's a sign of strength that a prime minister can put people where he wants them. When you've got ministers able to refuse being moved, that is an absolutely terrible sign. But
Yeah,
it is a sign of the incoherence. You know, Andy Burnham is supposed to have been waiting for the premiership. You know, we're hearing about the 100 days they've been planning this, and he's not made his mind up about any of the senior positions. That strongly suggests that there is no plan, there's no vision, there's no like prearranged team. He doesn't know who he's putting in what role. That is a terrible, terrible omen. And it would be, and I won't say this isn't a partisan point, it would be exactly the same for an incoming Tory Prime Minister, if ever we have one of those again. If you have a plan, then you have people that have signed up to that plan, and you know at least who your Chancellor is going to be, you know at least who your Home Secretary is going to be. If you don't know any of those things days before you enter office, that is just a weird position to be in.
It's a real worry. Now, Foreign Secretary is a very, very nice position, isn't it? Because you travel the world on a posh jet and you have afternoon tea with ambassadors and prime ministers and presidents. It's very ceremonial. Given that we haven't got a military, there's not much else that a foreign secretary does other than glad handing and representing the country overseas. So it's a plum job. But again, it's not the job that Ed Miliband wants, because he wants net zero times 100.
He does, and it's going to be an interesting power struggle. You forgot, of course, we merged the Department for International Aid into the Foreign Office, so actually you are responsible for sponsoring boy bands in West Africa.
Do you mean the Ethiopian Spice Girls?
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
a big fan of them, actually.
Okay, well, fair enough. Well, in which case, surely you believe as a free marketeer that they'd be commercially successful.
No, they're very, very good. Yeah,
but
the scary spice, the Ethiopian scary spice is properly scary.
Okay.
I'll spare you the details.
It is a very plum gig, because these days, when it used to be a more substantial position because the Prime Minister simply didn't do as much of it. But now the Prime Minister goes through nearly every. When was the last time there was a major international conference and the Prime Minister sent the Foreign Secretary?
Absolutely
right? It just doesn't happen.
Because the Prime Minister wants the plaudits of being overseas, the international figure.
Well, it's increasingly just you see this every time with a Prime Minister as their career goes on. You know, they start out like, we're going to do domestic policy, we're going to be here in Parliament, and by the end of it, they're like, oh my God, I just want a motorcade. I want a motorcade and lots of other leaders who hate their voters too. Like, we can gather in some sunny place and discuss whatever it is. So it is a very plum gig, but of course this is going to be a shadow hanging over Andy Burnham, because Andy Burnham, he's liked rather than respected, right? I think he's got Boris Johnson's biggest flaw, which is Boris Johnson needed to be liked. And so...
Fatal in politics.
Absolutely.
And the willingness not to be liked is a political superpower. I will give you Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, and probably, love him or hate him, Nigel Farage.
Exactly, right? Or even, and to an extent... Actually, I was going to try and think of a Labour leader, but I actually can't think of one, because Tony Blair, although he was very effective, he did have that need to be liked most of the time. Although it did start to go, he got that more messianic phase by the end, but that was hardly his most effective period. But Ed Miliband remains the most popular member of the cabinet with Labour members, and that is going to potentially be a big problem for Andy Burnham, because as we've seen, these Labour MPs, they are not disciplined. If they decide that Andy is not for them anymore, they can start sinking his agenda.
Most definitely. Folks, a simple question for you this morning, 0344 499 1000. Will Andy Burnham break Britain? Can we afford Burnham in number 10?
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Tony in Marchwood. Good morning, Mark, and hello, Henry. Is Andy Burnham really playing his cards that close to his chest? Or is it that he just hasn't got a clue what to do? And listen, I want to get to this conversation about Andy Burnham as Prime Minister. Are we underestimating him, or will he break Britain? Let's talk about net zero, because, of course, the great mastermind of net zero within the Labour movement is Ed Miliband, Henry Hill. He goes to the Foreign Office. Does that spell the end for Britain's net zero experiments?
No. No, it doesn't. I mean, it is. There is going to be, and there already is, a profound tension in the heart of this Labour government, just as there has been for Starmer's. On the one hand, they are very committed ideologically to net zero and to Ed Miliband's particular vision of net zero. On the other hand, they need growth. They don't just need growth because it is, in the abstract, a good thing to have. They need it because it makes all of the difficult problems go away. If you have growth, that means you have extra revenue, which you can spend on, giving away things to your voters. You can also borrow against that future revenue, so it's politics on easy mode, right? But now, what's the easiest way to get growth? It is have lower end domestic energy bills. It is drill for the oil and gas in your territorial waters, even if you export it, because it turns out exports are brilliant for the economy.
Most definitely.
And so we already hear Andy Burnham umming and ahhing about maybe changing his mind on drilling, but I think it's going to be like pulling teeth. I think that every single time Chancellor Shabana Mahmood wants to try and get a pro-growth policy at the expense of net zero, there is going to be another fight, another row. We'll have more briefings from Ed Miliband and Ed Miliband's allies, and it's going to destabilise this government.
Now, I'm torn about whether this is good news or bad news for Ed Miliband. It's a more senior position, being Foreign Secretary. It gives you an elevated status and possibly makes him an heir apparent for the leadership. You also get a lovely big house. Is it called Chevening?
It is called Chevening.
Yeah, and it's a right fancy schmancy house. It's up there with Chequers, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Which I understand that they always enjoy having when they are Foreign Secretary, one of the perks of the job. But you can't help but feel like it's also a demotion, that it's putting Ed Miliband in his place, saying, look, we can't trust you with the economy as Chancellor because you're far too left-wing, and actually we're cooling a little on net zero, partly because the left-wing trade unions don't like it.
I think the phrase is kicked upstairs for what happened. Now,
didn't it happen to Boris Johnson under the leadership of Theresa May when she gave him Foreign Secretary in order to basically get rid of him and send him out of the country?
It's basically like a big box of toys, right? It's like, OK, you get a nice big house, you get lots of foreign travel, you get motorcades, all of this kind of exciting things. Please just don't cause any trouble. It's exile, functionally.
Yeah. And have no input, really, on the UK political project.
Exactly. And I think that, I disagree profoundly with Ed Miliband, but I do credit him with being somebody who genuinely has a vision for a big area of domestic policy and wants to see it through. And so actually I think he will not be pleased with this move at all. But that doesn't mean the end of his influence. Now, if you look at why the briefings we're getting about why he didn't make Chancellor, the interesting thing is that they're saying it's not necessarily that he's not trusted on the economy, it's that the party hasn't forgiven him for losing in 2015. And I think at this point, genuinely, it doesn't look like he wants to be Labour leader again. I'm gutted. I got him at 40-1 to be the next Labour leader. It would have almost made up for England losing if that had happened, but alas. So I don't think he is going to be an heir apparent, but he can, in his position as the most popular member of the cabinet, continue to cause an absolute headache. And I think that we're probably, if we are going to have a decisive break from the net zero agenda, it's going to require an almighty row that hasn't happened yet.
Is there going to be a tension between Andy Burnham, who identifies as being on the left of the party? There's talk of wealth taxes. He's saying that he's ready to ask Brits to pay more tax. He wants to invest in public services, which of course means more borrowed billions. And a Chancellor in Shabana Mahmood, who is more economically dry and on the right of the party. Is that a conflict point waiting to happen, do you think?
Probably. In fairness, we don't know an awful lot about Shabana Mahmood's economic policy. We know a lot more about her. She's established her reputation on law and order, and there's not really much evidence that she has developed thoughts about the economy.
Does it figure that she would be more economically dry?
That is my suspicion.
It's like a Venn diagram, isn't it?
Because these things do tend to go together, as you say. And I think there's simply a hard-headedness about some of this, because, of course, I think that if you're Shabana Mahmood, given the way that she's approached other areas of government, she's probably the kind of person who would say, OK, Andy, if you want to do the left-wing approach to fit to the public finances, we can do that. What's going to be needed is a massive increase in taxes on ordinary working people. You cannot do this with a wealth tax. You cannot do this by hitting a few easy targets. We tried that under the last government. You are going to need to go to the average British worker who is already feeling overtaxed, who is already in the depths of a cost of living crisis, whose housing costs are spiralling, whose energy costs are spiralling, and you need to tell them that you need to ask them for a lot more money in tax.
Most definitely. And
that won't happen.
Good luck with that.
Exactly.
Politically very difficult. Sir Keir Starmer, I have left Britain in a better place. In other news, there is a pig flying outside this window, and it's a magnificent bit of a piece of swine. I mean, seriously, what do you make of Starmer's legacy? What is Starmer's legacy, Henry Hill?
So, legacies are things that unfold over time. And so actually, I think it's quite difficult at this point to tell us exactly what it is, because we know what he wants it to be. He has been shoveling legislation out of the door on the basis of his legacy, the social media ban and everything else. Now, we don't know how that's going to play out. We don't know what other things are going to follow from that. Broadly speaking, I think that anything that a Prime Minister passes explicitly as a legacy thing should just be repealed. Your legacy is what you do in office. It's not a group of things you do at the end so that you're remembered properly. Yeah. I think he's just going to be remembered, if he's remembered at all, as just a missed opportunity, right? There are lots of Prime Ministers like him in the long history of the office, in for a couple of years, weren't up to the moment, disappeared. He threw away what fiscal room he had when he came in 2024. He spent 2 years pointlessly hiking taxes, giving in to the public sector unions. We're now 2 years further into a massive public accounts crisis, which is going to be harder and harder to solve. Did he make any of these things incomparably worse? Like, no. He basically didn't arrest, he refused to make any of the difficult decisions that are causing this problem, and to the extent that he did, because he had been a complete coward about it in the general election and not put any of it in his manifesto, he allowed his backbenchers to break his authority over a trivial $5 billion in welfare cuts.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, it's my view that his legacy is having made everything worse. So our society is more divided. Illegal immigration has not ended and, in fact, ratcheted up. Energy bills higher than ever on his watch, and of course an economy which is in freefall, you know, and this seems to be his great legacy, and the only thing he's interested in doing is pulling levers like social media bans. And of course he will always talk about lifting children out of poverty by removing the two-child benefit cap, but that was a policy he said that we shouldn't do and couldn't afford before the last election. So his great legacy is a policy that he didn't want to do.
Exactly, and it's also one that's not supported by the majority of the British public, because it creates an unfairness between working households and households on welfare. But it's a bit like David Cameron. If you ask David Cameron what's the great thing that he did, and he'll say gay marriage. Now, he at least supported gay marriage, but it was a thing that half his party was in absolute revolt about, and it's interesting that he doesn't pick anything that you would say might fall more in the sort of squarely conservative side.
Well, I mean, I would say that the legacy of the coalition years was bringing a country on the brink of economic meltdown into viability again, into the black, with, I think, debt as a percentage of GDP was 10% when he became Prime Minister, and it was 2% at the end of that 5-year term. Not too bad. We would take that now, of course, but we're in a worse state, aren't we, notwithstanding the great efforts of Rachel Reeves. By the way, where's she going to go?
We don't actually know. At least I've not seen anything about where Rachel Reeves is going off the top of my head, unless I'm just drawing a complete
Could she exit the cabinet, do you think?
She could. It would be brutal. And I think that given that what we've seen of Burnham so far is that, one, he's not really like that anyway, and two, he's bringing back people who left for worse things. You know, he's bringing back somebody who left over an expenses scandal and all sorts of other things. I think that she'll be found something, but I don't know what.
Police have arrested a man for threatening to kill the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, according to The Telegraph. The suspect, who's described himself as a terrorist on social media, warned Mr Farage, "I am going to shoot you in the head if you win." Of course, we are still processing the horror of Anne Widdecombe's murder. Meanwhile, Zia Youssef, who is, of course, Reform UK's Home Affairs spokesperson, has said Reform UK will introduce around-the-clock security for all MPs if it wins the next general election. Is that the right thing to do?
I think it would probably be better to have a system that was much more responsive than now, but is still based on active intelligence and response to threats. Because otherwise, one, it's going to be extremely expensive, but two, a big part of our democracy is the fact that you, any voter, you can go to a constituency surgery and your MP will be there in a village hall or a sports centre with nobody but a parliamentary assistant, and you can go and talk to them about anything, right? They don't have an armoured car, they don't have a motorcade, they don't have outriders, you're not going through a metal detector. And having seen the growth of all of those things around Parliament, you know, there's now a wall of steel around the House of Commons that there wasn't when I was growing up. I think it would be a shame if we ended up putting MPs behind that barrier.
Well, I think you're right, and I think it changes the fabric of our politics. Henry, brilliant to see you.
Thank you.
More power to you as the political editor of The Critic magazine, which is a cracking read. Lots more to come. England leave the World Cup in the semi-final stage, beaten by Argentina. What went wrong? I'll be asking TalkSport star Max Scott next. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000.
The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Go on a big holiday.
Emigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
England go out of the World Cup in the semi-finals to Argentina. What a sad story. What went wrong? Who better to ask than Max Scott, TalkSport star and legendary reporter, of course, regular host of the Weekend Breakfast show on TalkSport as well. Good morning. Or is it a good morning, Max?
No, it's a terrible morning, but good morning nonetheless. Look, last night was a capitulation of epic proportions, and all stemming from, in my opinion, the opinion of the vast majority or all TalkSport callers, the TalkSport pundits. Thomas Tuchel's tactical decisions ruined the game. England were 1-0 ahead with a better team, had nullified all of the threats from Argentina. They hadn't had a shot in the first half. And we scored in the 55th minute. And the strange thing that Thomas Tuchel managed to do is make a goal the catalyst for England's demise.
Yeah.
And in taking off Anthony Gordon, the goal scorer, the quickest player on the pitch, the most direct threat in that game for a defender, I think psychologically sent a message to the England players of, we're going to park the bus, we're going to hang off the goalpost and just hope to all hopes that Argentina don't score. And in doing so, and in retreating so cowardly, what we did was we gave Argentina the ball that they had very little of for the entirety of the game. We allowed Lionel Messi the freedom of Atlanta, and in doing so, gave them too many opportunities, capitulated, conceded 2 late goals, and our World Cup dream is over. So all of this, for my money, Mark, is on Thomas Tuchel.
And a lot of people are saying on TalkSport that Tuchel was employed to be the guy that gets this across the line and to be brave and to not capitulate and decide to protect a lead, that he wasn't that kind of manager, and that's exactly what he did.
And the irony here, you're absolutely right, the irony is that in one of his first interviews as England manager, he said that the England of Gareth Southgate in the Euro 2024 final were too afraid of getting knocked out and rather than being excited about winning. Now, you could hold up a mirror to Thomas Tuchel. That's exactly what his team demonstrated yesterday, and it's not through fault of the players. You know, I've been skimming international media to understand the response from outside this country, and none of it is about Harry Kane or Jude Bellingham or the stars of this England team. It's all about the collapse and the mentality of this England side. And I must say, because I've been coming on to talk now for the last 5 weeks during this World Cup and saying that Thomas Tuchel has the tactical acumen to take this England side further. And I genuinely believed and I'd hoped that he would. I didn't believe that he would be so cowardly as he was yesterday. And the same mistakes that we had under Gareth Southgate have characterised that performance last night, and it is a crying shame because this Argentina side were not better than England. If we'd have got knocked out by France or Spain in a semi-final, you could understand it because they're better teams. But this Argentina side isn't.
They've got a couple of stars.
Yes, that's it. But we nullified those stars, and we were better than that team on paper and for the vast majority of that game until Thomas Tuchel said, you know what, boys, park the bus, and gave them the space. And we bent over and had our bellies tickled.
Now, as you know, goals change games. And as you say, looking back on it, the worst thing we could have done by the looks of it was to have actually scored. Are we underestimating the extent to which Argentina changed because of that goal? Are we glossing over that? That if a team goes a goal down, suddenly the shackles are off and they've got nothing to lose. Is that an argument?
There is an element of that. But I think what we did is...
Because they got their tails up immediately, didn't they?
We poured fuel on the fire.
Right.
There was no bravery. Everybody sat back. What they should have done is allowed their defenders to defend and give them and then give the midfield an outlet. There was so much space available from the Argentina side. We had them exactly where we wanted. You know, invite the pressure, but leave your midfielders where they are, leave your attackers where they are, and when you inevitably get the ball back, just carry on playing. And it was just, they were fear-stricken. They were sort of, you know, what's the phrase? A rabbit in the headlights is exactly what they were. And of course, when Argentina conceded, they were going to put attacking players on. But you've got to hold your nerve, particularly if, as Thomas Tuchel, the manager, has done, particularly if you've said the problem for England has been that they've been afraid in these moments. Well, you have created an environment in making 3 defensive substitutions, taking off Declan Rice, Premier League winning midfielder, taking off Anthony Gordon, who's just been signed by Barcelona and scored in a World Cup semi-final against your arch nemesis. Like when you take those players off, you create an environment where the players then become afraid and the players then feel, well, all we have to do is defend now because there's no outlets anymore. And so all of this is on Thomas Tuchel. And there are many people out there that are frustrated that he is still in a job that pays him £5 million a year. Such is the capitulation at his hands. And it'll be interesting to see, you know, when the fog of war sort of clears, whether the FA hold their nerve and stick by their man, because the outcry today is overwhelming.
That's right. It's quite clear that the establishment within football, the FA, are 4 square behind Tuchel.
Yep.
He's their man. but the fans are in a very different place this morning. Tuchel is getting pelters.
Tuchel's getting... Yeah, of course he is. The callers on TalkSport this morning, I've been out this morning speaking to fans that unanimously say...
And they know their football.
And of course they do. They're the ones that pay the inordinate prices to go and follow their football teams, whether it's domestically or whether it's nationally. These are the ones that stay up in the middle of the night to watch England against Mexico and then go to work in the morning. And these are the people that it impacts. You know, football transcends. It's not just 11 millionaires on a pitch kicking a ball around. It represents the pride of a nation, and what particularly in a time where it's incredibly unfashionable to be proud of your country, where it's incredibly you know, against the grain to be proud of the St George's flag. That all goes out the window in a World Cup, and there's this genuine sense of cohesion. There's this genuine sense that we're together in this, right? Regardless of political outlook, regardless of what's your socio-economic circumstances, there is a sense of national pride that's a beautiful thing. And when you feel that you've been let down or you've been sold a lie by the manager, which is, we're going to be brave, we're going to take it to our opponents, we're not going to be afraid of getting knocked out, we're going to go for it. And when you're sold a lie, ultimately, you have an absolute right to voice your opinion. And all of it has been, to me in person, around London Bridge today, and on the airwaves on TalkSport has been, that is, as I've said several times, a capitulation, and Thomas Tuchel needs to go. And
why did Tuchel make that fatal error? Because he's a decorated manager, he's a top gaffer, he's won everything you can win in football outside of the international games. So why did he make this move, do you think?
I think he lost his bottle. I think it's as simple as that. I think he bottled it. And the strange thing is, speaking to TalkSport after the game, he said he had no regrets. Well, I'm sorry, Thomas, that's not good enough, because you've lost a game that you shouldn't have lost against a side, by the way, who have, I just think, been incredibly distasteful in their, you know, their use of sort of chants about the Falklands, bringing on that sort of the sign which essentially can be translated as the Falklands belongs to Argentina.
Booing the anthem, and of course the dirty play on the pitch.
Well, crikey Moses, it was, you know, it was the dirtiest tactics we've seen, and the referee let the vast majority of it go. So the whole thing was a crying shame, and I thought the tone of it completely brought down, whether it's the sort of Argentinian government who've been fanning the flames of hatred towards Britain, whether it's the players who've sort of played into this sort of quite nasty nationalistic element of the Argentinian football team, who are world champions and deserved world champions and have the greatest player we've ever seen grace a football pitch on their team. And for them to stoop so low, I think has been dreadful. And England fans, in the past, rightly have been criticised for some of their behaviour when travelling. That's changed massively, but they carry with them this shadow and this reputation of being something which they're not anymore. The amount of arrests, I mean, I don't know what the numbers are from last night, because there have been clashes between Argentina and England fans, but only 20 England fans arrested out of tens of thousands across, you know, the whole continent of North America during this World Cup. And I think that the tone has been lowered massively by Argentina fans, by their players, by their government, and it's a crying shame that the beautiful game has been politicised in such a negative way. And I'm not saying here that there'll be England fans that... Of course, there'll be England fans that have been at fault yesterday, getting involved in scraps. We are seeing reports of arrests being made. But that's just another edge to it, which makes it so sickening that they simply cannot let go of what was essentially an act of aggression on their part, which they lost in.
Correct.
And so that the whole thing leaves a sour taste in the mouth, whether it's from an Argentinian perspective or whether it's from what I believe to be incredibly poor decision-making from the manager, which he says he doesn't regret.
Oh, absolutely right. And you're right to add the historical context to this, because in the region of 250 servicemen died in the defence of the Falkland Islands, which is sovereign British territory. 99.8% of the islanders want to remain British. So it's very, very important that we remember that. It is, however, common sense, is it not, to protect a lead? Would Tuchel not have got dog's abuse for not defending that lead and possibly rolling the dice and losing the other way?
There's a middle ground here. And Thomas Tuchel used this sort of analogy in his defence of his approach. He said, "Well, if I'd have brought 3 strikers on, then you'd have all criticised me." Well, Thomas, don't take us for fools. We know football far better than that. It's not either uber defensive or uber attacking. For example, why not, rather than put 3 defenders on in your substitutes, why not put 2? Or 1, and then bring on a Bukayo Saka, or bring on a Marcus Rashford much earlier rather than with 2 minutes to spare. So I think there's a middle ground that Thomas Tuchel could have achieved, which would have protected the oncoming onslaught from the Argentinian attack, right? That would have done that appropriately, but would have given England more of an outlet in order to maintain possession, alleviate pressure, and potentially score on the counter-attack. There's a happy medium that Thomas Tuchel has refused to address, which is what is infuriating fans.
And no regrets is a tone-deaf response. Actually,
Yes.
It's an insult to the fans.
Without a doubt. You cannot say, having lost the most, for my money, historic game since '66, with all of the political stuff, with all of the hand of God stuff and the build-up and the players chanting about it, in all of that, you cannot say that you have no regrets because you've lost the game, the most historic game since 1966. So it's not washing with England fans. And I think unless there is a genuine contrite apology, an admission that he made the same mistake as Gareth Southgate, then I don't think it's recoverable for Thomas Tuchel with the fans. The FA might stick with him,
right,
but I don't think that the fans going into the Euros, if he's still manager, are going to feel a genuine sense of optimism, which I did.
The fans must have confidence in the gaffer, just as the squad must have confidence in the gaffer. And I was shocked to see Jude Bellingham, who of course was a hero in this competition, played so well, responding to criticism from Tuchel about a previous performance. And he just said, whatever. So there wasn't exactly, within the dressing room, it wasn't harmony either, was it?
I'm not sure.
Can you read too much into that?
I think that if a reporter puts a question, doesn't put the full picture to Jude Bellingham after he's played 120 minutes, I think his response is justified. And I don't necessarily think that was a problem. However, after last night, Harry Kane and Mark Gahey have both come out and said, well, you can't win a game like that if you just sit back. And so I think we're seeing cracks potentially in how the players feel about what the message was from their manager when they had scored. And we've already seen 2 players come out and say, essentially, we didn't do the right thing. That came from the manager. Now, whether that is enough to create an irreparable relationship between England players and their manager, I'm not too sure. And the big question is, well, who else would come in? And there's very little sort of in terms of the talent pool. One of the biggest criticisms about the FA has been that they are not producing they're producing top players, but coaches they are not. There's Eddie Howe at Newcastle, who's under quite a bit of pressure. He could be an option, but is he going to win you a World Cup? Not so sure. Frank Lampard's just got Coventry promoted back to the Premier League. Top young manager, top English world-class player in his day. Is he experienced enough? I'm not so sure. Pep Guardiola is available. Now, whether or not he would manage England is one thing, but you could go to him with a big offer and he might take it. There's questions about if you sack Tuchel, well, who next? Yeah,
well, that's exactly right. Do you think people power could be enough to see him lose his job?
No. I don't think that. The FA have really sort of put their flag down with Thomas Tuchel. And until yesterday had sort of been quite impressive certainly with his communication, with the messaging that he gives, his honesty, fans appreciate. But there's something about last night and how wimpish and limp-wristed that was, that feels right now. Maybe it's the emotion and I'm a passionate England fan, so maybe I'll calm down in a couple of days' time. But there's something unforgivable about the way that England capitulated. I'm not quite sure it's salvageable for Tuchel from the fans' perspective.
And then we'll go rapid fire if we can. Quite an easy draw. So therefore, our first big test was the semi-final, which we failed.
Yes, we failed it. Gareth Southgate got us to this position. Thomas Tuchel's job was to win a semi-final, get to our first final since '66, and then maybe go and win it, and he failed.
Harry Kane, he's going to be at the Euros, isn't he? But will this have been his last World Cup, do you think?
I think it will have, yeah.
Which is a crying shame.
I was just going to say it's a crying shame. It's a great shame. And that was one of my thoughts yesterday when I went and sat on Peckham Rye Common under a tree, unable to speak to my partner because I was so upset. And I just thought this was the opportunity for the greatest striker that this country has ever produced, for my money.
Wow.
That I don't think he's going to get another opportunity, and if he does, he's not going to be the same player.
And do we overestimate our ability as a footballing nation? Are we just a quarter or semi-final team?
The evidence would say yes, but the hope and the passion and the love for your country makes you believe that it's possible, and that's what hope is. The painful inevitability of hope.
Well, I can tell you who won the World Cup already. And it was TalkSport, because I have been glued to the network. It's been sensational. Your stuff has been brilliant. And, of course, the breakfast team, everyone's too many people to mention. Adrian Durham, of course, out there in the United States at the helm with all the amazing anchoring work that he's done. But TalkSport have smashed it.
Thank you, Mark.
And, of course, we're going to have great coverage of the final.
Yeah, as ever, TalkSport, the place to listen to that Spain-Argentina final. And after last night, Viva España.
Yeah, too right. Listen, great job. More power to you. Lovely to meet you properly,
you
Max.
too.
Max Scott, TalkSport reporter. Are you on air this weekend?
No, I've got a break. I've been non-stop for the last 5 weeks, so I'm having a weekend.
And you can enjoy the final and not have the stress of worrying about England. Fantastic. Folks, what went wrong? Should Tuchel go? More to come. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
She's the best-looking world leader in my book, so I wouldn't fall out with her. I quite fancy Georgia. When she's not busy running the country, perhaps we could hook up.
Well, you do know she's single because her partner tried to have a threesome, and that got leaked to the media, and they had to get a divorce. So she's back on the market.
She's on the market, right? Oh. Right, get me a ticket for
a threesome as well.
I'll get in trouble with my wife about this. Next question.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Will Burnham break Britain? Here's a voice note from Sadia.
The UK has become a communist, authoritarian, Stalinism state. It's only a matter of time when he returns to Parliament that Kemi and the rest of the MPs will rip shreds out of him, like she did with Starmer.
Damning words. Thank you, Sadia. Matthew is in Warrington. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Mark. Great to speak to you again, mate.
Lovely to have you back on. Andy Burnham, do we need to give him a chance?
No. But first, mate, I just say, good thing about England losing, at least Starmer's not getting a freebie to the World Cup final.
I know. And also his smiling face at number 10 and the congratulatory tweet, honestly, it would turn my stomach.
Yeah, that peed on his bonfire. But
and also I'm glad, in a way, that we don't have Andy Burnham saying it's because he's Prime Minister, it's a new era of hope. He can't play that card either.
Oh, no. So, Burnham, I think he's going to be like Barack Obama. He's going to come in with this great big hope of change for the Labour Party.
Yeah.
And he's a dead duck. But, you know, Barack Obama did absolutely nothing.
He did zilch.
Zilch. And I think Burnham is going to find out his hands are tied. He's going to have no money. The backbenchers are going to pull him into touch. The unions are going to pull him into touch. Ed Miliband, you know, Miliband, he turned on his own brother, so he can't be trusted. You know, people forget.
And he turned on Starmer. Matthew, he was Keir Starmer's best mate with friends like that. Who needs enemies?
He's got more faces than a town clock. So, you know, but Burnham might, you know, he lived in Warrington apparently for a while, and people who said he know him said he's actually a nice fella, but he's a champagne socialist with a northern accent.
Yeah,
and he's going to tax people. You know, no one's mentioned that Millipede, because he does the pays for the worldwide charities. He's already said he's going to give them 11 billion to out of the
foreign aid
treasury.
Absolutely shocking.
He said it at the weekend, but it's all because what's gone on happenings with Anne. Everything's getting brushed under the carpet at the moment, and that's what he'll do. He'll just do things on the side. He'll tax all the southerners, and he'll think all the northerners, and oh, that's great. But once that money runs out, he'll just start creeping up north and getting everyone else. He's got 2 years. He'll say, "Oh, I was a prime minister for 2 years. I'm like, how I made things better." They're not building any houses. Growth is at 0.1%. What's that? But they'll go in, they'll stand up next to it and say, "Oh, we've got growth." But it's nothing. Absolutely nothing. And he's a dead man walking in it, isn't he? He's a dead duck. He's going to go there for 2 years, milk it for much as he can, and then he'll call an election, and he'll try and get a coalition. He'll try and get the Green Party on board and the Lib Dems, but I can't see him lasting, and I can't see him be able to pull all the backbenchers into tow.
No, and if he puts together a coalition at the next election, Matthew, then we are finished as a country. Brilliant call, Matt. We will speak soon. Let's take a voice note from Trevor on the World Cup. What went wrong?
Good morning, Mark. Really gutted about England yesterday, but on the plus side, it means Keir Starmer and Andy Burnham and the Labour Party, who hate England, will not get the electoral bounce that they were hoping for, the feel-good factor. In fact, it's going to turn everyone's eyes to them. We'll bring the World Cup home when we've got a leader who loves this country, and I think that man is Nigel Farage. It's Trevor in Harrow.
Trevor, thank you for that. Should Nigel Farage have 24/7 armed security? We're going to discuss that in the next hour. 03444991000. But what about Andy Burnham? Will he break Britain? Lee is in Doncaster. Top of the morning, Lee.
Good morning. Sadly, I'm not in Doncaster at the moment. I'm over near to where Andy Burnham likes to hang out. But thank you for taking my call.
Whereabouts are you, Lee, this morning?
At the moment, I'm in Wigan.
Oh, yeah. Places. Very good.
Yes. I'm not a fan of Labour, as you probably know from my previous encounters.
Yes.
And how can I put this? Will he be able to save us from ourselves? No. I think that the basic premise is that, look at the success that he's made of Manchester. Well, has he made a success of Manchester? He's had the comfort of being able to sit there and when things go wrong, turn around and say, nothing to do with me, mate. I didn't have enough money from central government, which is exactly what our politicians over the last 20-odd years or however long it is, that they've been able to use it as an excuse, have said whenever Britain's not done very well, it's always been a problem of legislation from the EU, which we have to follow. Well, having the top job and only being accountable to the public and not having a comfort blanket of somebody else means you're not comparing apples and apples. You're going to end up with Labour's usual financial incontinence as well as incompetence.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to come crashing. I mean, how can I put this? Tony Blair, I didn't like him much either, but he was a very, very good salesman, or at least the team that were working for him were good salesmen. With Andy Burnham, I mean, what is there? Is there any substance to the man? where are the policies? What's he going to do? Where is he now? He's got a golden opportunity now to say, well, fear not, Parliament's going to go into recess, but here's a little taster of some of the things that are going to come up, and we'll be talking about them more. You'll hear more when, the King's speech comes up about my government will do this, that and the other. We've heard absolutely nothing, and we're all sitting here speculating about who's going to be the top members of his cabinet. And frankly, I don't think he has a clue. I think he's achieved what he wants to do. He's becoming Prime Minister, and that was his goal.
It's about Burnham, not about Britain, isn't it? I mean, Lee, just briefly, with a few seconds, I'm really worried about some of the policy implications of taking Shabana Mahmood out of the Home Office. It could be that Labour are now going to be even softer on immigration.
My fears too. I mean, people said, no, she'll never do a good job, because they sort of point at her fate and say she won't have the guts to do it because she will back down. She hasn't. She's done a reasonable job within the parameters in which she's allowed to work. I think she's done quite well. But, I fear for whoever will replace her that they will not be up to the task. Well, certainly they won't hold a candle to what she's done. And some of the names that keep being spouted, well, fills me with dread. But hey-ho, we are where we are.
Lee, hopefully you will help us prevail in this rather tumultuous political era that we're in with your common sense and your truth bombs. My thanks to Lee in Doncaster. So much more to come. The Reform UK security row rages on. Zia Youssef says if he's Home Secretary, he's going to pay for armed security for every single MP 24/7. Is that the right thing to do? Next up, a Knight of the Realm, Sir Michael Fabricant. Simple question this morning. Will Burnham break Britain?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Gotcha! Argentina do a number on England, and as a nation mourns yet another lost opportunity to lift the World Cup, should the manager go? Meanwhile, the United Kingdom gets a new gaffer in Andy Burnham, and he is preparing his squad for power as we speak, with Shabana Mahmood reportedly leaving the Home Office and going into number 11 as Chancellor. But does this mean that Burnham will be softer on immigration in order to please those left-wing Labour MPs? Meanwhile, Ed Miliband is expected to become Foreign Secretary. Does this spell the end for Britain's net zero experiment? And we're told that the former Greater Manchester Mayor is ready to ask the public to pay higher taxes in order to fund a socialist spending spree. So my question to you this morning is a very simple one. Will Burnham break Britain? Can we afford Andy Burnham in number 10? Let me know your thoughts. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222, or leave us a voice note. Let's get the views now of a very good friend of mine, former Conservative MP and now elite level political commentator and broadcaster, Sir Michael Fabricant. Sir Michael, good morning.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
Well, I'm very well, but I'm a little bit gloomy about the prospects for this country, both on the football pitch and in Downing Street.
Well, you know, I've been following football regularly. God, I've been a football follower now for must have been 10 days. And I saw last night the match. And, you know, I've been posting a graph of popularity of leaders. And it's quite interesting because Kemi Badenoch is now finally in the plus thing. But you've got Thomas Tuchel right up there, right at the top. I'm trying to get my finger in the right point. There we are, right at the top. And I suspect if they now did a graph now, he would have gone right down to the very bottom. But no, it was very sad. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was great when we got that 1-0 first off. And then it was if, you know, we didn't know where the ball was or anything. I'm no footballer. Boy, I used to run around like a demented ant when I was on the football pitch when I was at school, because I was a very fast runner. I just didn't know where the ball was. But it just seemed like that. I mean, why we didn't stay on the offensive, I don't know. But hey, there are better football commentators than me.
It's not unlike the world of politics, is it? We haven't won the World Cup since 1966. We always seem to have the players. What we don't seem to have, Sir Michael, is the leadership.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, it's quite interesting. I spoke to my very, very best friend, ChatGPT, last night, and 5 of the footballers on the Argentinian squad, and 4 of them in the actual team last night, actually play for English clubs. I mean, it was quite interesting after the game how they were sort of hugging each other, some of them, because some of the English guys play on the same team as the Argentinians who are playing against them. But yeah, you're right. It seems that we just don't have the right leadership, at least when it comes to playing football, or at least when it comes to this present government. I had to say that, didn't I?
Well, let's talk about that, Sir Michael. That is your area of expertise. What can we read into the news that reportedly Shabana Mahmood will be the Chancellor? What does that mean, do you think, if it happens, for immigration?
Well, she's a bit of an unknown quantity, but I think with the Home Office, she was doing or trying to do a pretty decent job.
Yeah.
You always know when someone's trying to do a decent job, because then the Labour backbenchers, who are all very, very left-wing, object. And they did object to her, and they think she's far too left-wing. And that's one of the reasons, sorry, far too right-wing. And that's one of the reasons why she's being moved. So I'm hoping that she will be able to do a decent job as Chancellor of the Exchequer. But I personally have some major doubts. First of all, you've got Burnham saying that he's going to have higher taxes and they're going to have wealth taxes. Now, that's all very well and good, except how do you define wealth? Because when Labour were talking about mansion tax before, it seemed that most people who own properties in London, and maybe even where I'm speaking to you from now, Lichfield, which is quite an expensive property area, all these people would fall under the category of being so-called wealthy. And that'll mean that taxes will be higher for a lot of people in the UK. So Shabana Mahmood is a bit of an unknown quantity, of course, as being a Chancellor of the Exchequer, but it could have been far worse. It could have been Ed Miliband.
Most definitely, I agree with that, but I'm worried about what it means for illegal immigration, and it's also a concern in regard to the so-called Boris wave of 2.6 million people who came to this country in the course of 5 years. Some reports suggest that that Boris wave comes with a long-term bill of £250 billion because you have low-skilled individuals who will be dependent on the state for the rest of their lives. Now, Shabana Mahmood had a great policy. You would have to wait 10, not 5 years for settled status based upon 3 criteria: a command of the English language, the absence of a criminal record, and you would have to be economically productive. And I'm really worried, Sir Michael, that that's going to go up in smoke.
I think it will, because of pressure, again, as I was saying earlier, from the very, very left-wing Labour backbenchers who didn't like it at all. And, of course, the Boris wave was meant to be for people who had skills, but it just hasn't worked out that way. And, of course, Starmer has been boasting that, that there has been less net immigration. But that's because so many immigrants who are producing for this country have left the country because he's put the economy in such a state. Rachel Reeves has really dragged us down with huge debt and growth rates which were not as originally expected.
Well, you're an entrepreneur as well as a former politician, Sir Michael, and you know, to coin a phrase, that you cannot tax your way to prosperity.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I set up a company from scratch with a friend of mine, and we ended up by setting up radio stations in 48 countries around the world. I just don't think I could do that now in the present conditions. Banks have become far more conservative, far more worried about lending money, partly because the cost of borrowing money is so high. Not only because we've borrowed so much, or Rachel Reeves has borrowed so much, it's also because the world economies do not have faith in our own economy. They think we're taxed too high. And as a consequence, they're worried that we won't be able to pay the debt back. And that leads to the fact that we're now paying a massive amount in repayment because interest rates to the UK are now some of the highest in Europe, if not the highest in Europe. They just don't trust us to lend us money.
We've got 3 years until the next election, potentially, Sir Michael. How do you see Andy Burnham's premiership playing out? What do you think's going to happen? What's your best guess?
Well, that's a $64,000 question. The truthful answer is nobody knows. I mean, he's got a great personality. He's a lot nicer guy. I always said that Keir Starmer is a dud. I'm not going to say that about Andy Burnham, but I don't think Andy Burnham has got the headroom in a number of ways. First of all, because of the huge debt that Rachel Reeves has left us with.
Yeah.
All of her own making, I might say, because of her talking down the economy, and it stopped people investing, it stopped people buying in the shops, which meant that our income from taxes went down. But also, he's got no headroom because of his own backbenchers, who are nothing like him. I mean, the trouble with Andy Burnham is you don't know what he stands for. When he came into the House of Commons, and I was there when he came into the House of Commons, when he got elected, he was a right-wing Blairite. And he was trying to make massive reforms to the NHS. All of that was blocked by the Labour backbenchers. These are the unemployable people who become MPs. They're backbenchers because even in a Labour government, they're not fit to get onto the front bench. And they're all left-wingers because they know absolutely nothing about running a business. And of course, Andy Burnham falls into that same category. He's never run a business.
Well, I agree. My interpretation of Shabana Mahmood, one of the few high-quality ministers in this government, my interpretation of her leaving the Home Office, Sir Michael, is that Burnham wants to soften on immigration. How might we interpret Ed Miliband as Foreign Secretary, which is being reported this morning?
Well, I think it puts him out of harm's way, because the truth of the matter is the Foreign Secretary job is mainly done by the Prime Minister. The Foreign Secretary is normally, like Yvette Cooper very much is, a nodding donkey, just carrying out the will of the Prime Minister. Now, what I don't know is whether Andy Burnham is as tough on Ukraine and other issues as Keir Starmer was. That we will have to see. I think, if anything, the one, wouldn't say success, but at least Keir Starmer behaved in a way that I thought was appropriate regarding foreign policy. I hope Andy Burnham will as well. So actually, as far as Ed Miliband is concerned, it gets him out of harm's way. I mean, the last thing we want him to do is to continue in his present job. He is a green fanatic. And got to bear in mind that carbon dioxide emissions from the United Kingdom counts for less than 1% of what the world is pumping out. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't have restrictions, but, you know, there is a lot of oil out there. And, you know, to quote Donald Trump, drill, baby, drill, because the oil is there and it will help us keep fuel prices down. And incidentally, our fuel prices are the highest in Europe. And that doesn't just mean how it affects us at the gas pump. It also means that our manufacturing becomes less competitive because they have to use fuel as well, particularly in ceramics, because I'm speaking to you from South Staffordshire, but a lot of North Staffordshire potteries have gone out of business. They just can't afford to fire up those kilns.
Well, I'd like to go back to the common sense 90s position, which was really the consensus in regard to the environment, which was an energy mix. We need to go back to that. Does the decision, if it happens by Andy Burnham, to put Ed Miliband in the Foreign Office suggest that he's going to row back on net zero? Because we know the unions don't like it.
Yeah, well, I very much hope that will be the case. I mean, I'm afraid, as much as I love Boris Johnson, that was also one of his fanatical things. I will tell you a very quick story. I think I told you actually out of the studio, but I'll tell the viewers this and listeners this. I remember years ago, you will remember when there was Gordon Brown in power and you had David Cameron as leader of the opposition, and he was campaigning and he had the slogan, "Vote blue, go green." And I'd bought myself a great new car, which was a convertible. And he saw it because I was doing something to us, fiddling with it. I can't remember what it was. I think it was getting the roof down. And he said, "Oh, that's a nice car. What make is it?" and all the rest of it. And I sort of told him, and I said, "The only problem is it's a petrol engine, twin turbo, and every time I accelerate, 3 species become extinct." And he laughed, and then he suddenly said, "Oh no, I shouldn't be laughing at that. Very bad joke, very bad joke."
It's a great story.
And I hasten to add, by the way, 3 species do not go extinct every time I accelerate. I've still got the same car.
Well, there you go.
Great condition. It's 20 years old, and I love it.
Well, like you, beautifully maintained. Meanwhile, Sir Michael, young people on benefits are now less likely to get a job than the over 55s. If young people can't get on the housing ladder, can't afford their rent, can't even get a job, this doesn't end well.
No, it does not. And, you know, one of the things that Keir Starmer kept saying yesterday at Prime Minister's questions, his very last, was, "I've left the country in a better condition than I got it in." And that's absolutely untrue. Youth unemployment under him has soared. And one of the reasons is because he has said that the minimum wage for young people should be the same as older, experienced people. Well, one of the reasons why the minimum wage was lower was to encourage employers to take on young people, despite the fact that they would have to train them up, get them into a sort of work-like ethic, and that would be slightly offset by the cost of employment, which was lower. That isn't the case anymore. And, you know, Spain has historically had much, much higher youth unemployment than us, and it led to terrible disasters and rioting in Madrid And I would hope that that's not going to happen here. But, you know, having a whole phalanx of youngsters who can't get employment is particularly bad news for this country and its future.
Well, I agree. Now, Sir Michael, we are still processing the horrific murder of your friend and mine, very much a member of the Talk family, Anne Widdecombe. Zia Youssef of Reform UK has stated that he'll introduce round-the-clock security for all MPs if he becomes Home Secretary. Do you back that move?
Well, I can tell you that some MPs don't want that sort of security. I just think it's slightly naive, because if you're going to provide 2 police officers who are armed for every... You need 3 shifts. So you're talking about 6 police officers times 650 members of Parliament, plus other security measures that are taken, sometimes more than 3 police officers. It was interesting. I shouldn't pick out people, but I was with you on Sunday, and in your studio, and the next guest was Liz Truss, and you saw the number of police officers she had, and she'd been Prime Minister for how long? 45 days? I can't remember the exact number.
44, 45, yeah, that ballpark.
Yeah. I think it's very expensive. I don't think it would work necessarily, because a lot of MPs I know have refused to have that sort of round-the-clock treatment. And I think Zia Youssef went further and said that former MPs, because don't forget, Anne Widdecombe was not an MP when she was murdered. She had left the House of Commons several years earlier. I think he was saying that they should have protection too. So, you know, we'd probably end up with finding that there'd be even fewer policemen on the streets and just following around a number of MPs. I know I would feel uncomfortable.
Well, I wanted to ask you that. If you were still in the House of Commons, would you like to have bodyguards, Sir Michael?
Well, it was offered, even when I was an MP, but I didn't take it up. I sort of felt reasonably safe in my, well, I felt very safe in my own constituency. Of course, the problem was with Anne Widdecombe, someone had travelled several hundred miles to come down to murder her.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think it's unwise to talk about individuals' protection, but certainly when I was an MP, it was offered, but I didn't want it. And when I did surgeries, I did them very carefully. I did them by appointment. I would go to people's houses, or they would meet me in a coffee bar if it was a general subject they wanted to discuss. One thing I didn't do, and I noticed my successor in Lichfield is not doing it either, are sort of open surgeries where anybody can just turn up. I think that's asking for trouble. And, you know, and indeed it is asking for trouble, because, of course, it was David Ames who was killed in a surgery.
Sir Michael, thank you so much for your time. We will speak soon. Sir Michael Fabricant, former Conservative MP and now broadcaster and political commentator. Fascinating conversation. Your reaction to that 03444991000. How do you feel about the idea of our politicians having around-the-clock armed security? Does that change the fabric of our democracy? Does that change the optics of our politics? Is it a step too far? 03444991000. And what about Andy Burnham? Will he break Britain? This is Talk.
she's the best-looking world leader in my book, so I wouldn't fall out with her. I quite fancy Georgia. When she's not busy running the country, perhaps we could hook up.
Well, you do know she's single because her partner tried to have a threesome, and that got leaked to the media, and they had to get a divorce. So she's back on the market.
She's on the market, right?
Oh.
Right, get me a ticket
for a threesome as well.
I'll get in trouble with my wife about this. Next question.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk. Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer. Now, Zia Youssef, who is Reform UK's Home Secretary, sort of shadow Home Secretary, he's covering the Home Office brief, has said that if he becomes the Home Secretary under a Reform UK government, he will have 24/7 protection for all MPs. Is that the way to go? Let's get the views of Chris Phillips, former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Good morning, Chris. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Mark.
What do you make of this announcement? Is it necessary for all MPs to have around-the-clock security?
No, it's not, and it's pretty much impossible to do, actually. If you think about the number of police officers, because if you're talking about firearms, then it has to be police officers that would be required to look after 400-odd members of Parliament. But then Anne wasn't, of course, a member of Parliament. She was an ex-member of Parliament. So how far are we going to take this? Is it every ex-member of Parliament that gets it as well? It just becomes pretty much impossible. And to be quite frank, I think most MPs wouldn't want police officers following them around, going on holiday with them, that it would just be quite impossible to manage.
Most definitely. Now, as has been reported earlier, Chris, a man has been arrested for threatening to murder Nigel Farage. Unfortunately, it's not an isolated case, is it? Our politicians face the greatest peril they ever have.
Yes, and it's not just politicians either. It's this beast of social media that allows complete idiots to have their say, and everyone's got a view on that. It's such a difficult thing because you have to take these things seriously to some extent, but you can't react to every threat that's made online. And I feel sorry for Nigel Farage because of all the politicians, I think he's the one that actually is most at risk and has been seen to be attacked on several occasions, and yet he gets pretty much no security. So I think you've got to work this on a risk basis, and where people need security, they should get it. Where they don't, they shouldn't.
Does it surprise you, therefore, that Mr. Farage doesn't have this level of security?
Yeah, very much so. I think, as I said, of all the politicians, apart from the very front bench who all get it, I think he probably needs it more than any other. I mean, if you look at people like Theresa May, Boris Johnson, they're all receiving police firearms officers securing them, and probably will do for the rest of their lives. David Cameron isn't really at threat, but he gets that security. Nigel Farage, as we've seen, it's been proven that he has got real threats against him.
If more MPs require armed security, Chris, does it change the fabric of our democracy? Does it change the optics of our politics?
Yes, it does. And we've got to be realistic about this. We've got to provide security for members of Parliament, but they also need to be out in their communities speaking to the public. That's their job, effectively. They're representatives. But of course, there are lots of ways that they can make themselves less at risk. And they often need to be reminded of those.
And needing armed bodyguards, Chris, would be a disincentive to enter politics, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel we've got far too many politicians in any case. But we need good people. We need better people than we've got currently. And we want to incentivise those people that really have got talent. So we've got to protect those that need protecting. That is done to some extent. I think it can be beefed up a little bit without going the whole hog.
Chris, we need to let the police get on with the job of identifying and understanding what happened to Anne Widdecombe. Were you surprised that they so quickly ruled out any terror links or any political motivation?
I think in hindsight they wouldn't have said that. However, you know, when you actually identify what they said, the Devon and Cornwall police actually said, at this stage, we have no reason to think it's a political motivated killing, but we are keeping our options open. And of course, that's what happened. And as they found more information out, then that changed. Really, this is to do with the fact that they feel the need to feed the beast of media and social media. And really, we've got to get away from that a little bit and just, as you say, let the police do their job, not require statements every 30 minutes so that we can keep people updated and understand that it's a complicated, difficult investigation that's going on.
Yes, because they're damned if they do and damned if they don't, aren't they? If they make a statement about whether they think it was terror-related or not, they'll be held to account for that at a later stage. So do you think it might have been better if they'd kept their counsel altogether and said nothing?
Yeah, but then there's the pressure from media and social media. There's conspiracy theories. It's a real knife edge that they have to balance on, I think. And
should they have said we don't know? Should they have said? Do you think perhaps with some of that wording, Chris, might have been a little sort of naive or may have backfired? That they gave the impression, look, this doesn't look terror related, and now, of course, terror cops are looking at it. Do you think maybe they got in a muddle with their messaging?
I think they did, and I think really they've got to say something without saying anything at that point. I think they will learn from it. But again, you know, everyone pulls out the police are rubbish, but they've done their job. They've caught the person who did it, and they're now investigating, and they'll hopefully come up with charges which are found guilty at court.
Chris, we've heard about the many threats to Nigel Farage. No doubt many of our politicians face threats that we don't know about. We saw, of course, the murder of Charlie Kirk, a conservative political activist in the United States, a couple of attempts on Donald Trump's life. Have we got to get used to this?
Well, it's a sad part of society. You know, there's always been assassinations. I do talks about the number of assassinations that have happened in the past. And, you know, there has been assassinations right throughout time. Our politicians now, and there's a particularly febrile situation going on in the country and across the world, and I think politicians are at the forefront of that. But I would say that we have to be careful, and politicians need to be careful about labelling people as racist, sexist, and because that just stirs it up and puts a target on people's back.
Yes, we've got to stop demonising anyone in politics, don't we? And in some quarters, Chris, figures like Nigel Farage are being characterised as Adolf Hitler 2.0. That's deeply wrong.
It's completely outrageous. And, you know, those that have said it should really apologise and reel back from these stupid comments. I mean, and this is part of this low-level politicians that we've got. You wouldn't have heard people, you know, politicians of the 80s, you know, Margaret Thatcher's era, if you like, making these sort of comments because they're just so ridiculous.
They most definitely are. Do you have a wider overview of the investigation into the murder of Anne Widdecombe, Chris?
No, I don't, and I think it's really dangerous, as we've seen from Devon and Cornwall police, to go into thinking what may have happened, what may not have happened. Let the police do their job. It will come out in due course. They've clearly got their man. They're convinced they've got their man, and they need to work out the motives. And that's the key point here. Why would someone travel that far to commit a murder on a very old lady? Simply, you know, it's just incredible to think that would be anything other than some political motive. But let's find out when the police have done their investigation.
Most definitely. Chris, it's always a great pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time. Chris Phillips is the former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Andy Burnham wants to raise your taxes further in order to have a socialist spending spree. Will Burnham break Britain? That's next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Andy Burnham is going to be our next Prime Minister, and he has not ruled out a wealth tax. But do they work? Who better to ask than Adam Smith, former Chief of Staff to the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, Jeremy Hunt. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Mark.
Here we go again with another failed idea, a bit like rent controls.
Absolutely. I mean, this wealth tax idea goes round and round and round, never seems to go away. But all the international evidence would suggest it doesn't work. Every other European country that's tried to introduce one sees wealth flee the country. It never raises what everybody claims it will raise. And eventually they sort of go back to the drawing board and having done huge damage to their economy. So let's hope we don't go down that route, but it seems like we might.
But Adam, here's the thing. In a sense, we already have wealth taxes and it's already destroying the economy.
Well, that's right. And I think actually that's probably more likely what we'll see from whoever Andy Burnham's Chancellor is, rather than a kind of specific wealth tax. They will look to target the wealthier with all sorts of other taxes, whether that's property taxes, higher income taxes, those sorts of things. So we will have higher wealth taxes, just hopefully not a wealth tax.
Now, Adam, Gary Lineker, may God help us, has interviewed Andy Burnham for his podcast. Let's take a listen to the Prime Minister-elect, as it were, discussing wealth taxes.
Economically, what can you do differently? A wealth tax, possibly, of the super rich, which is what a lot of people, economists, are calling for.
But I'm not going to rule things out right now. I do believe we need a greater sense of fairness and people feeling that things are being done in the right way and a fair way. But at the same time, I don't want to sort of be perceived as somebody who's coming in with grudges and agendas and, going to just immediately find or demonize one group or create a new way of dividing people.
Adam, how left-wing do you think Andy Burnham is going to be on the economy? What do you anticipate he will do? Is his bark worse than his bite, do you think?
I hope so. But I mean, I think what we do know about Andy Burnham is that all of his plans involve more spending. If he wants to take control of water companies, energy companies, if he wants a big council house building programme, that needs more money. And we're already borrowing far too much. We're already taxing far too much. But those are the only two sources of income that he is likely to look to. I can't believe he's going to cut spending elsewhere as much as I would like him to. And I can't believe he's going to reform welfare as much as I'd like him to. So if he's going to deliver on what he has sort of promised his supporters, he is going to need more money. And I think that will come from more taxes, unfortunately.
Adam, how much trouble are we in financially?
Well, the public finances are stretched. And, you only have to look at what the OECD said yesterday, who are not exactly a kind of bastion of, right-wing economic thinking. But they were warning that taxes are too high and debt is too high. And those are both because of decisions that, the Labour government over the last 2 years have taken to put taxes up to record levels and to massively increase borrowing. And lots of people are warning that we're in a sort of fiscally unsustainable position. Sadly, I kind of think that Andy Burnham's probably going to make that worse.
Well, the elephant in the room, Adam, isn't it, is that we live beyond our means as a country and have done for many years.
Well, I think that's true. And I think until we see, proper plans to sustainably reduce how much we spend, and that will involve difficult decisions. There's no doubt about that. It's not an easy thing to do. You can't just come in and say, oh, we're going to slash, X% without really thinking about it. But we do need to spend less. And if we spend less, we can therefore tax less and our borrowing will come down and growth will go up.
And if we don't spend less, then eventually receivers will come in and do it on our behalf, which is what happened to Greece in 2008.
Well, that's ultimately what could happen, yes. I mean, I hope that whoever is Chancellor at the time will take some action ahead of that happening. But, whether Labour backbenchers will let them take whatever action is necessary. But you're right, it may well need a kind of, a shock like that to get the finances back under control.
And let's hope it doesn't come to that. I know a lot would have to happen for that to be the case, for us, Adam, to default on our debts. It's probably still unlikely at this stage. But how do you see things panning out for the economy in the next year or two? You've got Nigel Farage, Adam, suggesting that we could have an early general election following some kind of Greece moment for the economy, possibly as early as next year.
Well, I wouldn't rule out an early election for a slightly different reason. I mean, I think the economy is going to sort of bump along. I mean, we had growth out today. I think, was it up 0.1%?
Yeah, so I've been out celebrating, I've got to say, Adam. I bought Mrs. Dolan a new frock. 0.1%. What a time to be alive.
Well, let's hope everybody else has gone out and done the same, because a bit more boosting.
0. That number, I'm not a mathematician, that number couldn't be lower, could it? It's as close to 0 as you'll get.
If you're going to be positive, that is the smallest positive you are going to get. And obviously it could be revised down in a few months. So
wow. Well, in that case, I'll have to send the dress back. It's from John Lewis.
I think growth will bump along as it is. Inflation, I think, is higher than I think we'd like, and is likely to stay higher. So I don't think the economy is going to be in great shape over the next year. But the reason why I think that might lead Burnham to go early is he will start having, meetings with Treasury officials who say, if you want to do all of the things you've said you want to do, these are the nasty decisions you're going to have to take. Because even if you are happy increasing tax, you're not going to get that much more money out of the wealthy before they disappear. And so he might just think, you know what, I'll go early. Whilst I get a little bit of a bump, I'll defer any nasty decisions I have to make until after an election. And if I'm in a coalition with the Lib Dems, so be it. I've got 5 years to do what I want to do, rather than 2 or 3 years of just becoming more and more unpopular.
Meanwhile, Adam, families are being encouraged by the Citizens Advice Bureau to claim sickness benefits to help cover their energy bills. If that's not an example of broken Britain, nothing is.
Yeah, I mean, that is ridiculous. The disability benefit system is there rightly to help with the costs of having a disability. It's not that, they're not there to help people, fund household bills, shopping, whatever it might be.
Or to tell the public to effectively game the system.
Yeah, and I think we've seen more and more of that over the last few years. Citizens' advice, that's probably the most, extreme and ridiculous example of it. But there's a whole host of, TikTok videos about how to game the system. And I think that is why the welfare system needs fundamental reform, because we need to make sure it's there for people who need it and not easily gamed.
Most definitely. Of course, I'm showing my age, aren't I, Adam, calling it the Citizens Advice Bureau. But of course, we know what it's there to do, and it's supposed to be there to advise people on what their rights are, what they have every right to access to. It's not there to encourage people to bend the rules. Meanwhile, young people on benefits are now less likely to get a job than the over 55s. Of course, Adam, we've got the highest youth unemployment in Europe, which is going some.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid that is what happens if you make it more expensive to employ young people, that you get fewer people in work. And the weird thing about this Labour government is that they seem to have sort of ignored the fact that they've created the conditions for this youth unemployment crisis by, as I think your previous guest, Michael Fabricant, was talking about, by removing the youth element of the national minimum wage, by increasing national insurance. You make it more costly, and what then happens is the more young people find it harder to get a job. What the Labour government then seems to want to do is take a load of taxes from other people and fund programmes to guarantee work for young people. Well, the easier way to guarantee work is to lower the cost of employing people, not keep increasing it.
Well, the great irony of this Labour government, Adam, is that they need growth. They need national income with which to invest in public services and, as you've said, nationalise certain industries. Do you think common sense will prevail under Andy Burnham, that notwithstanding his left-wing bluster, that actually he may get into number 10 and do the right thing?
Well, there is some hope in that, because if you look at what he's done in Manchester, for instance, I know he talks about Manchesterism as being the sort of business-friendly socialism. But when you look at what he's actually done, the reason why Manchester city centre has boomed is because he's basically allowed housing developers to ignore affordable housing requirements. And then you've got a load of very nice luxury flats get built. So there is a sort of pragmatic element to him. The problem is he sort of said, so many things to so many different people to get elected that I'm not actually certain where he'll end up.
Well, I think one of the better government ministers of this administration, Adam, has been Shabana Mahmood, who's been tougher on immigration, particularly the so-called Boris wave of around 2.6 million people who came here over 5 years, only 20% of whom on a work visa. She toughened up the rules. It was going to be 10 years rather than 5 before you got your settled status, based upon 3 criteria: the absence of a criminal record, a command of the English language, and being economically productive. Now, that may be diluted. The million-dollar question, Adam, is what kind of chancellor is Shabana Mahmood going to be if she gets the top job, which it's rumoured she will?
Well, the truth there is I don't think anybody knows. There's two...
Shabana doesn't know.
There's 2 good
She
things
never thought about
this.
it. She wanted to remain Home Secretary.
Well, and actually, maybe for the country, it'd be better if she did. But there are 2 good reasons why we should perhaps celebrate her becoming Chancellor over Ed Miliband, for instance. Firstly, as I understand it, she declined to serve under Jeremy Corbyn because she disagreed with his economic policies. So she's clearly not a completely mad left-winger. And secondly, I think the bond markets will react more favourably than if Ed Miliband was appointed. And what that means, in short, is that we will pay less in debt interest if she's appointed compared to Ed Miliband. So that might slightly mitigate the need for tax rises.
Well, let's hope that is the case. Adam, a fascinating conversation, quite the education. Adam Smith is the former Chief of Staff to the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, Jeremy Hunt, who I will say steadied the ship following Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget. Thank you, Adam. We will speak soon. Folks, what do you think about this? Can Britain afford Andy Burnham in number 10? Will Burnham break Britain? Your call's next. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000.
The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Go on a big holiday.
Emigrate. So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
We've got some breaking news that has just come in. TalkSport have announced a brand new partnership in a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Shabana Mahmood reportedly going to be our next Chancellor of the Exchequer. Has she done a good job as Home Secretary? No, says Peter in Liverpool, who joins me now. Morning, Pete.
Morning.
Now, listen, you beg to differ, because I've said that she's one of the better government ministers, but you're not so sure.
Yeah, I'm a bit fed up of hearing this from, not from just yourself, from other people.
Yeah.
But we had a government come in 2 years ago pledging to smash the gangs. So who do they appoint? They appoint someone that has been videoed welcoming illegal immigrants onto the beach.
Yep, there is that footage. I agree with you there. She's got that in her history.
She also wanted to boycott Israeli products.
Yeah, yeah, and she's been on pro-Palestine marches in the past before October the 7th.
Yeah, she's made speeches. She's coming up with a scheme to make it easier for charities to sponsor people to come here legally. You know, I don't see this as a person that wants to cut immigration. That this will massively increase it.
But Peter, I hear everything you're saying, and she's certainly not as robust on border control as I would like her to be. But are you not encouraged, Peter, by the fact that left-wing Labour MPs are not happy with her reforms?
I heard all the things you said before about the things that you've got to qualify to become a permanent resident in Britain. But we can't deport one person back to Pakistan at the moment.
Yeah, that's true.
There are how many? I'd say literally thousands of people in this country who have committed offences, who are here, you know, not as a resident or legally. They should have been deported. I could not go to America years ago if I had a traffic offence. Now, today, the things that are happening in this country, by, you know, I can't just say, you know, people coming here illegally, but also people who live here. Yeah, but you don't have a right to stay here if you don't respect our country and least of all abide by the laws.
Well, Peter, you are right, and no Home Secretary is serious about illegal immigration as long as you are signed up to the ECHR, and that is the issue.
I don't think Keir Starmer was ever, or I don't think even the last 14 years of the Tories, neither of them were ever serious about stopping illegal immigration or legal immigration. This country is... We're overcrowded. The infrastructure can't cope. Yet no one can do something that they could do overnight. They could stop this overnight if they wanted. It's no good praising a Home Office minister that is not. She's not doing anything. They're all kind of just biding their time. And
do you not worry though that her replacement, Peter, could be worse, especially if they water down changes to the Boris wave?
Well, I'm just looking at the person that we've had placed upon us now, Andy Burnham. He's not been elected. He's been nominated. He is another nominated PM that we've had, and I think it's all contrived myself.
Yeah. Do you know Andy Burnham, by the way, because he is from your neck of the woods? What do you think of Andy Burnham?
No, I don't know him personally. No, but. I would not think he was ready for high office, least of all Prime Minister of this country. He will not make the changes that are needed in this country.
What do you, before I let you go, Peter, what do you make of Keir Starmer saying that he has left the country in a better state since he became... I think I got your answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous, really. I mean, you just look at he got a standing ovation. It's unbelievable. These people are really not living in the world of the British people. They need a sharp lesson. I heard somebody the other day, and I'm afraid it was on somebody on Talk Radio, saying that we need to give MPs more money, £250,000 at least, and you might get better quality. I've never heard such rubbish in all my life. We have got MPs that are earning fantastic money, and to be honest, they're failing in every way they can. There is nothing in this country that is running right.
I agree. And the idea you would give them a pay rise is unimaginable. Peter, great call. Please call me again soon. Enjoyed your company this morning. Michael is in England's second city of Birmingham. And Michael, yet more disappointment in the World Cup. What went wrong, big man?
I hate to challenge you whether Birmingham is any longer England's second city, whether we're any longer in England is debatable.
Yeah.
But,
you could mention that or develop on that, Michael. How do you feel that the city has changed in your lifetime?
It's changed. It's changed in the last 18 months, Mark.
Wow.
Noticeably. Put it this way, all right, I didn't want to really go down this rabbit hole. My 11-year-old son, who lives not far from where your previous caller came from, and is a biracial little boy, the first time he came down here to where I live, after 10 minutes he said to me, "Dad, we're the only English-speaking people here. That's not right."
My goodness, and that little boy just speaking with an honest heart.
Yeah, I can walk 2 kilometres from here and not hear English spoken on that 2 kilometres.
Well, Michael, it shocks me to see what's happened to Birmingham. It's changed beyond recognition. No one voted for this, and I think it's a metaphor, Michael, for what's happened to the country. While I've got you, Michael, we've got some breaking news. Downing Street have backed a minister's call for FIFA to investigate whether Argentina's players broke rules by waving a banner in support of their country's claims to the Falkland Islands, saying the World Cup might not be ours, but the Falkland Islands definitely are. That's pretty disgusting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's disgraceful. I think that this whole World Cup's been politicised, but I don't want to, turn this into talk sport, but I have to stick up for Tommy Tuchel. Look, there's too many people at this time of year, like armchair Wimbledon fans, armchair golf fans. They become armchair football experts. I've played it and I've watched it, and I know that England weren't deliberately defending last night. They were being pushed back by the stronger side. They couldn't get the ball. Because Argentina were knocking it around.
Well, I think that's a fair point, and I put that to Max Scott from Talk Sport, Michael, saying that after that goal, Argentina changed their approach.
Yeah, I mean, it happens in football. People say, "Oh, blame the man." Look, the mistakes Tommy Tuchel made were his squad in the first place wasn't creative enough. He should have taken Trent and he should have taken Cole Palmer at the very least, and maybe even Phil Foden, because we were lacking creativity. But it wasn't about defending. Argentina had the ball and they were knocking it around really well. England were doing what they call in football training doggies, chasing the ball between one player and another.
Yeah.
Now they were always going to get I knew. I said in the pub, England will get tired in the last 10 minutes. You can't keep up chasing. It's the most difficult thing of football.
Michael, that's very interesting. There are two sides to every story. It's not the fault of Tuchel. Michael, we'll speak soon. Thank you for your comments about what's happening in Birmingham and your response to England exiting the World Cup at the hands of Argentina. Grace is in London. And Grace, I've only got 1 minute, but that's plenty from a genius like you.
I was frustrated by Starmer. He keeps boasting about lifting children out of poverty, but he's actually cut programmes that helped children in far more severe poverty elsewhere in our world, far more cost effectively, so pound for pound. That money was doing far, far more than money spent here can do for kids who are literally starving. He cut those programs, but he keeps saying, oh, I lifted kids out of poverty. And his boastfulness, him saying that he's proud. Now, I know he's not a believer. I've seen reason to believe that God exists and that Jesus rose. And they said that we should be humble. We should aim to have humility. Yes. And I know Starmer doesn't share those beliefs, but I do think that the way we're seeing pride, I'm not talking about the parade, that's a whole other story, but the way we're seeing pride elevated in our society is not a great thing. You know, we used to have the saying pride comes before a fall being quite well known, and I don't think that politicians saying, I'm so proud I've left the country in a better state is particularly helpful.
Grace, you are so right about that. In fact, it's an insult to our intelligence. Lots more to come. Will Burnham break Britain? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. Gotcha! Argentina do a number on England, and as a nation mourns yet another lost opportunity to lift the World Cup, should the manager go? Good afternoon, it's Mark Dolan here on Talk, in for the brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer. Well, of course, we've got our football woes. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom gets a new gaffer in the dressing room, and it's Andy Burnham, who's preparing his squad as we speak, with Shabana Mahmood reportedly leaving the Home Office and going into number 11 as Chancellor. So does this mean that Burnham will be softer on immigration in order to please those left-wing Labour MPs? Meanwhile, Ed Miliband is expected to become Foreign Secretary. So does that spell the end for Britain's net zero experiment? And we're told that the former Greater Manchester Mayor is ready to ask the public, wait for it, to pay higher taxes in order to fund a socialist spending spree. So my question to you this afternoon is a simple one. Will Burnham break Britain? Can the country afford Andy Burnham in number 10. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222 or leave us a voice note. Lawrence in Bolton. Good afternoon, Mark. Yes, Burnham will break Britain the same way he's broken Manchester. He's increased the council's debt from 500 million to 1.6 billion, despite putting up the mayoral precept 44% in some council tax bands. Piccadilly Gardens is horrific, and he's totally abandoned those of us in the Greater Manchester area. That's Lawrence in Bolton. Ian, Mark, regarding Burnham, take a look at the debt that he's left Greater Manchester with. Biggest of any combined authority in the country. And what about this on Shabana Mahmood? Mark in Southampton. Mark, what exactly has Mahmood actually done to tackle immigration? What a good question. Let's put that to Britain's favourite political double act, Neil and Christine Hamilton. Good afternoon, folks.
Hello, Mark.
Hello, Mark. You could see we've still got a hangover from last night. We can't believe we're still in the mode that we were in when we got that first goal. So, anyway.
Well, you are both wonderful patriots. Christine, what went wrong? Why did we lose?
Oh, look, I have to be honest, I'm not a football fan, but I watch the big matches, so we were on tenterhooks. Why did we lose? I'm not going to get into that. People say it was Tuchel, and we got one goal and we thought, right, all we have to do is defend instead of continuing to attack. But it's for the pundits to say why we lost. But what I'm horrified in is the way some people have piled in on our lads. They did their best. They played their hearts out, and they've been training and leading up to this. We could not have asked more of them. You know, Argentina were the world champions. They're probably about to be the world champions again. And honestly, our team did their best. Whose fault it is, that is for other people to say. But I mean, it was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. Oh dear.
It was. I mean, Neil, is there a metaphor for the country? Are we less good than we think we are?
No, I don't think so. We got to the semi-final, and that's quite an achievement in itself. After all, there was only one game left between us and winning the cup itself. I think that it was a match of two halves, wasn't it, really? In the second half, I'm afraid, Tuchel made a strategic mistake, which was perfectly understandable given it was the same strategy that he'd employed successfully against Mexico and also against Norway. But of course, Argentina are a team in a different league altogether from Mexico or Norway, and I think they probably are the best in the world. After all, they've got Messi, who's a genius, and I think Tuchel could be forgiven for making the decisions that he did, although in the event I think they were the wrong ones. There were too many people packed into our half as defenders, whereas we should have tried to keep the ball out of our half as much as possible, because those Argentine attackers were relentless. The wave just kept on coming, didn't they? And they are a magnificent team. Whatever we think of Argentina and the politics, I think we should keep that out of football altogether, personally. But I do think we need to give credit where credit is due, and I think they did have the edge on us.
Excuse me, yes, we should keep politics out of football, but that's exactly what they are not doing. Yeah. And before we get on to that and the Falklands, etc., their tactics were dirty. They really were. Yeah. I mean, I don't know the rules of football. I would not want to have it as my mastermind subject, but you cannot go up behind a opponent, put your arms around them and pull them away. You can't do half the things they were doing.
Do that to me anytime.
Well, we're not playing football. Shut up. And I honestly, I know I'm biased. Of course I'm biased. We're all biased. But I felt that the referee let them get away with pretty dirty, rotten, filthy behaviour.
Most definitely. Neil, would you keep faith with the manager, Thomas Tuchel, and his £5 million salary?
Yeah, I would, actually. I think he's been a success. And it was one error which is perfectly understandable. I think it wasn't a catastrophic blunder. We were just pipped at the post in the last few minutes of the match, weren't we? Right up until the last 5 minutes. We were in it to win it.
And yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Neil. Christine, you mentioned the Falklands. Downing Street has backed a minister's call for FIFA to investigate whether Argentina's players broke rules by waving a banner in support of their country's claims to the Falkland Islands, saying the World Cup might not be ours, but the Falkland Islands definitely are.
Well, I think FIFA should jolly well come down on them hard. That was a disgusting behaviour to bring politics in at the end of the match. They'd won, for heaven's sake. Couldn't they just be magnanimous in victory? The Falklands were British. The first settlers on the Falklands were there about a century before Argentina was even a country, for goodness sake. Well, is that not correct?
It was made a colony in 1833, and Argentina was created as a country largely through British diplomatic and military power in 1816. But the Argentines have never actually occupied the Falkland Islands at all. So there's no territorial claim which is justified whatsoever. Spain was the colonial power, and we must all hope, of course, that Spain beats Argentina to re-establish its colonial power over Argentina in the World Cup. We won the last match against Argentina in 1982, comprehensively, never to be repeated, I trust. So it's a pathetic attempt to flag wave. They know they can't actually retake the Falklands, and it's always useful for failing Argentine politicians to sabre rattle about the Falklands to distract attention from their own domestic woes.
Christine, I would characterise the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood as the best of a bad lot. How might we interpret reports that she's going to be Chancellor?
Well, I mean, thank God it's not Ed Miliband is all I can say. I mean, the thought of Ed Miliband in charge of the nation's finances was enough to send you into the heebie-jeebies. Look, I don't know. I'm not aware that she's got much, shall we say, fiscal experience. But as the incoming Prime Minister didn't even know what the fiscal rules were,
correct.
It doesn't matter. But the trouble is, if you've got a minister in any department who isn't really at home with their brief, all that happens is that the civil servants run rings around them. So I don't know. Maybe Neil has a view on that.
Well, they're constrained by the economic circumstances that they and the predecessor governments have largely created. We have a massive debt mountain which is still increasing by £100 billion a year. That's the size of the current government deficit. We've got a national debt which is now over £2 trillion. Our debt interest alone is well over £100 billion a year, as much as we spend on education in this country. And we've got the highest tax rates for 70 years since the war, and nothing's happening. There's no growth in the economy, so she has absolutely no leeway to do anything whatsoever. Of course, they will fiddle about at the margins with all sorts of taxes that will raise very little, if anything at all, but make people's lives a misery, whether you're a landlord or a saver or even somebody of working age and in work, but on low incomes, because there's no scope even for raising the tax threshold, which should rise in line with inflation every year, but it doesn't. So, people at the bottom of the income scale are being squeezed perhaps even more than the people who are in the middle as well. And this is supposedly a Labour government which is supposed to look after the people who are at the bottom of the heap, which they certainly don't do. So I'm not bothered really about Shabana Mahmood or any of the others, because none of it would make any difference. Of course, Miliband is self-evidently the worst option. And making foreign secretary would be great. I think he should be travelling the world the whole time, staying out of our country.
Most definitely. What does that mean for net zero, do you think, Christine? Because we know that the left-wing Labour-backing unions don't like it.
No, well, nobody who's got a brain in their head approves of net zero. It's the most ludicrous policy. It's kicking ourselves in the foot, etc., etc. I hope it's the death knell for net zero. I mean, the logic behind net zero is non-existent, and it's only Ed Miliband and his ridiculous zealotry that's kept it going as long as it has. I mean, it's utter madness. Apparently, the grid was near to closing down a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago because of the heat. It's mad. I mean, Ed Miliband's little volte-face the other day saying, "Oh, I'll let a few drillings go on in the North Sea if you'll let me be Chancellor," which was the subtext of all that, didn't work. But what was the question? Net zero. It's lunacy. It's absolute lunacy. It is destroying this country. We are mad. We're paying to import the gas that, is it Norway, has taken from the North Sea.
Correct.
Probably from underneath our waters. I mean, it's a child could tell you that it's bonkers.
Yes, they are exploiting oil from the same seabed as our own. Make it make sense. And Neil, what about the implications for immigration in the absence of Shabana Mahmood, who was a little more robust on the issue than her colleagues?
Well, robust in the language, but actually, what's the real difference that's been made? Yes, there's been a reduction in net migration, but all that means is that more people are leaving the country than did previously. And we all know why, don't we, with this ghastly government that we've got. Who wouldn't leave if they could do so?
But that said, Neil, her proposed changes to indefinite leave to remain were welcome, and it's likely we won't see them now.
Well, that's perfectly possible. They wouldn't take effect for several years anyway, but so we wouldn't see any short-term difference. But yes, of course, it's long overdue. You know, we should have a real immigration policy, which we set caps on the numbers that we want to take, and we divide that fixed number up into the various categories where we feel there are shortages that need to be filled. But there shouldn't be an indefinite right to remain just because you've been in this country as a guest, as it were, for whatever period of time. We have added more than 10 million people to our population in the last 20 years. And we can't go on like this. You know, we're a small country. We have the highest population density in the whole of Europe, not excluding the Netherlands. So no wonder we're bursting at the seams. You know, our infrastructure can't cope with the vast scale of the increases that we've had, largely because of the so-called Boris wave after 2019. Of course, when they took the caps off immigration from the rest of the world. This government, of course, has been even worse. I mean, let's not forget that whilst illegal immigration and the small boats is a massive and serious problem, the bigger problem is legal migration, which is adding hundreds of thousands of people to our population every single year, and more possibly than we know, because the figures can't be relied on anyway. We've no idea how many people are illegal overstayers in this country, millions and millions of them. So the government has completely lost control and needs to reassert it. We're not going to get that under Burnham, because he's going to doff his cap at the left, because that's the voter base that he has to appeal to. And we all know that Labour has a disproportionate amount of support from big cities in England with large migrant populations. And the client groups that represent them do not want strict immigration control. So no, we're not going to see any difference between Burnham and Starmer in any practical outcome.
Well, you're right about the elephant in the room of legal immigration and the so-called Boris wave, which some take the view brings with it a long-term price tag of £250 billion, because these folk, many won't work, others are low-skilled and therefore will rely on in-work benefits and subsidised housing and the NHS for the rest of their lives. Doesn't sound like a great deal to me. However, Christine, Andy Burnham is not a stupid man. He's also an experienced politician. Is there a danger that we're underestimating him?
Well, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. I mean, let's see. It's a bit suspicious, isn't it, that he hasn't allowed himself to be grilled at all by a single... I mean, he had one outing with, I think it was Victoria Derbyshire, when she screwed him to the wall about the fiscal rules, and that's it. He had what he called a press conference, but he didn't take any questions. I mean, we have no idea what he thinks. We have no idea where he wants to take this country. So, I mean, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, but I have zero confidence, as people have said earlier, the way he left Manchester. I mean, it's terribly easy, isn't it, to lead a large parish council, which is what Manchester is. It's other people's money all the time. You're just spending. He's going to find, being Prime Minister, a massively different job. I mean, what's his experience of foreign affairs, for example? I mean, none. I mean, I don't know. I dread what's to come, to be honest. I just don't feel that this government, never mind what their politics are, I actually don't feel they're competent. That's the problem. They're not competent.
Neil and Christine, I'll let you both answer this. It's the first time, Neil, that we've spoken since the horrific murder of your friend and mine, very much a member of the Talk family, Anne Widdecombe. I'm sure you've discussed it at length, but we haven't spoken. How are you processing this horrific tragedy?
Well, I've known Anne for nearly 60 years. We were active in student politics together all those years ago. And it was a horrific outrage that she was killed, and she was a martyr to her cause, because I think it's almost bound to be the case that this was a planned political murder. And in spite of the police trying to hide that right at the start, it was plain as a pikestaff what's going on here. It was an absolute tragedy for her, of course, but also I think for the rest of us. And I hope that good will come out of her death, and not only will we give proper protection to politicians who deserve it, but also make us wake up to what's happening to this country, which has created the conditions in which these terrible events happen. Do something about it.
Most definitely. And what we're seeing, Christine, is the demonisation of figures on the right.
Yeah, absolutely. But can I just say before, I mean, as Neil says, we've known Anne for a very, very long time. We were all in student politics together. And there was a side to Anne which most people never saw. She was a wonderfully kind, compassionate, affectionate person. And I wrote a book in 1997 called Christine Hamilton's Book of British Battle Axes. And there is Anne Widdecombe. She was a battle axe. And the definition of a battle axe is that a battle axe has got balls, basically. And Anne certainly had balls, the size of footballs and plus. She was an amazing woman. And yes, I think it's... I would be very frightened now if I was an active reform politician. I really would, or indeed anybody on the right. And I think it behoves everybody to start moderating their language, because the right don't regard the left as evil and demons. They just regard them as misguided and wrong. But the left regard the right as evil, demons, etc. And the language that's used on social media about some right-wing politicians is horrific, especially women in particular. And I've been horrified to read what people have said in the last few days about the stuff that they receive on social media. I mean, I've been blocked out of Twitter for the last 5 months. Somebody's hacked my account and I can't get back in. But I think it's time for a little bit more civility in politics and humanity, you know. Go on, you want to say?
I want to say, let's not forget the role of the Labour Party and Starmer and other Labour ministers and apparatchiks in demonising the right. Reform have always been described by Labour as the far right. People who are concerned about immigration, ordinary people not involved in politics at all, described as the far right. We all know what they mean, Nazis, fascists and so on. Well, they're not Nazis and fascists at all, but a continual use of this language and the violence with which it's expressed, I mean verbal violence, not physical violence, has created the kind of environment in which deranged individuals think it's all right, therefore, for us to take extreme action against the people who represent political views that they don't like. And so I'm afraid that the left, and not just the far left, bear a big responsibility for what has happened, not just for Anne Widdecombe, but for all the political violence that happens in this country, where people who take the sort of views that have the sort of views that we have on the right, centre right, even let alone further to the right, are regarded as people who are dispensable because our views are beyond the pale. Well, they're not beyond the pale, because, as in the case of Reform, as we know, 25-30% of the entire country now supports them as a party, and that's something that the Labour Party could never understand. That was the problem.
Well put. Last word, Christine?
Well, I was just going to say, I can't remember her name now, but there have been some disgraceful comments on social media in the past. They have now all been deleted from sitting Labour MPs. Absolutely horrific comments from sitting Labour MPs. And of course, Angela Rayner herself called the Tories, never mind Reform, scum. So, you know, it starts at the top. and the language of politics. I thought, by the way, Prime Minister's questions, I mean, it was past the sick bag at points, at certain points, but I thought Kemi Badenoch got it absolutely right. And what I loved was hearing from Keir Starmer that both she and somebody else, I can't remember who, was incredibly kind to Starmer at some stage. I think he lost somebody. I can't... His brother, that's right. And, you know, there is humanity in politics, and that's got to come to the fore more. It really has. We cannot go on in this direction. We just can't. And we've got to have manners and humanity in football and politics.
Most definitely. The Labour MP I think you were referring to was Natalie Fleet, who apologised for her remarks in the aftermath of Anne Widdecombe's murder. She tweeted, "Nigel Farage and his gang of bin men get the same security as the rest of us. I'm sick of the faux outrage." Truly shocking. Natalie Fleet there, the Labour MP for Bolsover and Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls. You couldn't make it up, Neil.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say when I was trying to talk over you a second ago. It is ironic, just the same as it was the Minister for Housing who was responsible for introducing the Renters' Rights Act, was the one who was exposed as having evicted tenants at the time that the legislation was going through. So
they're an absolute bunch of stinking hypocrites.
They are. You've got the corruption minister being done for corruption. The list goes on. Neil and Christine, wonderful to see you again. And we love what you're wearing today. You look very fetching in your England strips. Neil Hamilton and Christine Hamilton, Britain's favourite political double act. More to come. Can Britain afford Burnhamism? This is Talk.
We've got some breaking news that has just come in. TalkSport have announced a brand new partnership in a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
How do you solve a problem like Prince Harry? Two former Justice Secretaries have criticised the Duke of Sussex for attacking the judge who presided over his hacking case against the publishers of the Daily Mail, a case that he famously lost. Let's get the views of Di Davis, who is the former head of Royal Protection. Good afternoon, Di.
Hey, good afternoon to you. You know, there's a lovely saying, engage brain before opening mouth. Or, I may look stupid, but don't confirm it by opening your mouth. And I'm afraid in both those cases, Harry fulfills that saying. He opens his mouth wrongly, foolishly, on numerous occasions. And here we go again, attacking the judge well out of order as far as I'm concerned.
And Prince Harry has previous on this, Di, referring to the decision by the UK authorities not to grant him armed royal protection whilst in the UK as an establishment stitch-up, which was not the case. They were simply following the rules.
Absolutely. And as we saw, his wife and his family were able to come, apparently, to Highgrove, see the King, and you and I and the rest of us didn't know anything about it, which has been the case that I've been making so often on this channel and others, that if they go quietly to various places, then we wouldn't know. And it's perfectly possible. He is the author of his own misfortune, time and time again. And sadly, he is neurotic as far as some of my friends who are reporters on the Daily Mail. And I've known them for 30 years, and I would trust them implicitly. That's my faith in the ones I know.
Well, it's quite shocking, isn't it, Di, how intemperate the Duke of Sussex's language was after losing this case against the publishers of the Daily Mail. He described it as a complete and obvious whitewash. He said the lengths to which the court has gone to exonerate the Mail is as shocking as it is totally unwarranted. He said the judgment relies almost exclusively on the evidence of journalists and senior executives at associated newspapers, whilst dismissing compelling evidence from others. Well, I'm not sure how compelling that evidence was. For example, Di, his claim that he didn't know anything about Charlotte Griffiths, the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, before cutting off contact. Well, a rather intimate set of exchanges would demonstrate the opposite was the case.
Well, that's the trouble. If you're going to go to court, you better get your story right. And clearly, on a number of occasions, he got it completely wrong. And the judge, who's a very, very experienced media judge, who sits as a chair of a variety of committees, he is an excellent judge by all accounts. I don't know him. But seriously, he spent a lot of time, and I think there are over 400 pages broken down in about 250 paragraphs, which I haven't read, but each one of them exonerates those men and women who are as decent, I'm sure, as Harry thinks he is. In fact, I know so many of them, and they are decent people. And if decent people give decent, honest opinion and evidence, then the judge is entitled to believe them.
97 claims, Di, 97 claims against the Daily Mail were thrown out.
Yes, because the evidence wasn't there. And as we've learnt, suspicion is one thing. I've got a lot of suspicion about Harry and his teams. I really do. But that's not evidence. And you can't go to court. So it's amazing that the lawyers, and I find 50 million for this case extraordinary. Somebody is milking the system, and it should be looked at. How on earth you can gather 50 million? And that basically must go on lawyers on each side. It is extraordinary.
And it's not the best use of court time either, Di.
Well, it isn't. There are so many pressing issues in this country. And again, Harry has to accept now, after 7 years of constantly in the headlines for a variety of different reasons. And unfortunately, the Mirror didn't fight the case to the level that the Daily Mail did, or Associated Press.
Correct.
And Piers Morgan was saying on his channel, you know, I wish they had shown the same gumption as the Daily Mail, because they're a decent paper. They make mistakes, of course they do, we all do. But as far as I'm concerned, the vast majority of their reporters are decent, honest, and their evidence was believed. And I'm delighted to hear that.
Alex Chalk, KC, served under Rishi Sunak as Justice Secretary, Di, and he said expressing disagreement with the judgment is perfectly reasonable, but Prince Harry's attack on a High Court judge was over the top, personal and unacceptable. Judges act in the same name of the king judges act in the name of the king and swear an oath of allegiance to the sovereign. That's how our constitution works, as Harry should know better than most. However disappointed he was with the result, insulting one of His Majesty's judges is a line he should not have crossed. Sir Robert Buckland has said the tone and content of the attack was not appropriate. The king won't be happy with these remarks.
I wouldn't have thought so. If I was his father, I wouldn't be very happy either. And I would have counselled him a long time ago not to go there. But he did. He insisted. He has a thing about the press, rightly or wrongly, in his opinion. He's entitled to opinion. But what he's not entitled to do is to allege a judge is corrupt. A judge is part of the whitewash of the establishment, which he constantly alleges. That's a serious allegation. And he's very foolish, because the same judge is going to afford the costs. And I'd be very surprised if he didn't get the large majority of it. I hope he does, because it might just shut him up for once.
What do you make of the Duke of Sussex's mental state at the moment, Di, and his judgment? I know you're not a mind reader, but it seems, based upon his actions, that he's not in a good place at the moment.
Well, he doesn't appear to be. And it's sad because, you know, people would like his father, the king, to reconcile in one sense. I mean, that's quite a big ask, really, of the royal family, given what Harry has written about, claimed, and all the rest of it. And I've said many times on your program and others, if they just kept quiet, got on with their lives in the United States, left the rest of us to get on with our lives, he would not be under this so-called paranoia, fear of threat. I've looked at some of those threats, and frankly, they don't stand up to scrutiny either. And I speak with half a century of experience in policing and security worldwide. I don't know who's advising him legally, security-wise, and all the rest of it. But what I would say is, if there was an iota of real threat perceived in this country, he would get the appropriate security. No ifs, no buts.
So you think that he's safe in the United Kingdom in the absence of official royal protection?
I do indeed, and I've staked my profession reputation on it. The last time royalty protection had to use their firearms was in 1974, when Princess Anne was almost kidnapped. And again, even when now Queen Camilla was going into a riot and somebody put a pole almost taking her head off, that the officers didn't pull their guns. So the reality is that, yes, you never know, because you can never be 100%. But if you look at VIPs across the board now, and we have a big discussion, you know, who should get protection. But there's a limit to how many officers are trained to do it, how many can do it. So we've got to have a system and structure, which is called RABAC, the committee that looks at these things. They are advised by intelligence, by the police, and those who have the knowledge. So we have to accept there has to be a structure. He doesn't, unfortunately.
Di, if it's not about safety, what might have motivated Prince Harry's campaign to have armed cops in the UK?
Well, it's the fact that if you have them, they're very good, and they can make things happen very quickly. They can take appropriate measures to fly you through from airports in VIP, which I'm sure he gets anyway. You can go through traffic with blue lights and all the rest of it. It allows you to have others to make the travel arrangements for you, to review it, to structure it, and so on and so forth. When it works, it's first class. He doesn't, in my opinion, now deserve it, because he's here quite often on commercial.
Is it a flex? Is it an ego trip?
Well, you might think that, and I might agree with you. But at the end of the day, it has to be about safety and security. And I've worked in LA, as I've said many times. It's hugely dangerous. There were nearly 500,000 violent attacks in the last 5 years, and yet he chooses to live in LA. You couldn't make it up, in my opinion.
Di, before I let you go, we haven't spoken since the horrific murder of our very good friend Anne Widdecombe. What is your appraisal of what has happened, the investigation? We know that the cops have just got to get on with their job now. We don't want to speculate, but can I just ask for your view of what happened?
Well, it's horrific, and my condolences to you, and because I knew you knew her very well. I've met her once or twice. She was charming. Everybody who actually knew her says what a lovely lady she was. So I take great umbrance of the people who try and decry her. But that's one thing. The police have a job to do. Devon and Cornwall, I'm sure, were doing their best in the circumstances. Who advised them to say some of the things they did? I've always learned, keep an open mind. And that's what I'm saying to you. I'm keeping an open mind as to the motive behind this individual. Clearly, something sparked them, because he was arrested for further terrorism offences. And they don't do that lightly. So I presume there must be evidence to indicate preparation, etc., of alleged terrorism, which includes attacking a Reform spokesman. And quite often we miss the fact that she was a Reform. Everybody says she was a Tory MP. Well, we all know that, but she was a Reform spokesman, and an important one. So clearly we have to look at those issues, whether Reform are more targeted than other Tories or even left. You know, I would imagine some of the former extreme left people could be equally under threat, given that we have so many nutters. Lastly, I'll tell you is there are nearly 1,000 on the current fixated threat assessment. 20% of them, as I understand, are dangerous. That doesn't include people who are terrorist motivated and are clean-skinned. So we've got a bit of a problem in this country, and I hope the police, in whatever shape and form, are tackling it. They've got 7 days or less now, 5 days, to interrogate this man, and I'm hoping they find out what his motive was, and therefore we can then apply common sense and the appropriate. There's a strange word in today's world, isn't it? Common sense. Apply it when you're doing anything about protection and security. It works wonders.
Amen to that. Di, thank you for your time and your expert insight. Di Davies, former head of Royal Protection. More to come. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A majority of Brits are concerned about the implications of digital ID. New polling from Delta Poll spoke to 2,000 British adults on behalf of the advocacy group Liberty, with more than half of Brits concerned about the implications of being tracked based upon this new proposed government policy. Let's get reaction from Alex Klaushofer, who is a journalist and freedom campaigner. Good afternoon, Alex.
Hello.
Do we know what the government are actually proposing to do? Because they've watered down some of their plans, haven't they?
We do and we don't. The first thing to say is that when this was announced, there was no clear blueprint or outline given to anybody really about what exactly the government was proposing. So that's created quite a lot of confusion. But it is clear from what they've said and from what experts close to government have said in Select Committee, and also in the recent digital ID consultation, a number of things are really clear, which is that it's a centralised system that they want, which means the word here is interoperable. Otherwise, data sharing, which means that when you put your data into one bit, it automatically goes across to another bit and people in those other departments or bodies get access to it. So that is part of the reason why it is concerning, because when you do that, you are creating a system which not only tracks potentially, but also gives permission or not. So we're talking about a potential tracking and auditing system and a potential permissions system, all run centralised by basically a state computer.
And we know that if this starts as a small intervention in our lives, it will grow. This is bound to be the thin end of the wedge, Alex, if we accept the precedent of any kind of digital identification.
Yeah, I quite agree. I've studied authoritarianism in a number of countries, and regardless of the technology, regardless of how things start out, things creep, or sometimes they move quite fast. Now, in this context, in Britain 2026, we've got a number of really big red flags to tell us that we shouldn't accept this, we shouldn't go ahead with this. One is the constant talk about restrictions in the name of climate. Fuel, energy, meat, all that kind of thing.
The idea that if you buy a steak, you might not be able to pay for it because you've hit your carbon allowance for the week.
Yeah, I mean, the Climate Change Committee has explicitly talked about this. That is a government taxpayer-funded body. So this is not, you know, behind the scenes or any secret stuff. This is the thinking about the government and the kind of ecosystem of bodies and experts around the government these days. They think it's okay to make these decisions for us. And of course, we shouldn't be forgetting COVID and how quickly we went from a functioning liberal democracy to all being locked up in our homes, or in my case, fleeing the country.
More power to you for doing that. It's disgraceful that people, for example, were forced to take the vaccine just to have a normal life in this country. By all means, takes the vaccine, fantastic if it's been invented and it's available. But as you say, this authoritarianism was shocking. Alex, some would argue that it will streamline public services and help root out corruption and illegal immigration. Is that a fair point?
No, not really. I mean, it's the sales talk. A lot of it comes from the Tony Blair Institute. And then other people he's kind of collected around. Convenience is a line. I'm tempted to use the word narrative, which, you know, makes everything sound easy and innocent for the public who are not looking into this. It's more likely to do the opposite. There are two systems, existing systems, nothing actually like what the government is proposing exists currently, but there are two systems that government has been looking at in recent months. One is India and the other is in Estonia. Estonia has led to a lot of chaos and confusion. Biometrics, which are central, getting leaked, biometrics not working, people getting cut out of benefits and systems, and even deaths leading to it. An Estonia system, which is much more efficient. I've actually been to Estonia and have interviewed relevant people. Smaller country, so easier to do, but that, to your point about vaccine passports, meant that Estonia was one of the first countries to introduce vaccine passports. And when you look at the EU are very keen on digital ID and are developing a wallet, which they advertise, the company which is promoting that, advertises it as a benefit, having a benefit of being able to make your appointment for mandatory vaccination. So all
Absolutely
these things
shocking.
are out there.
Absolutely shocking.
Out there.
And, you know, the COVID vaccine, it may have saved lives. Pensioners and people with comorbidities may well have benefited from having it. Young people, statistically, probably didn't need it. There were side effects as well. And yet we were forced to comply.
Yeah, well, we don't want... I mean, there are many threads in this whole digital ID story, but one of the clear threads, if you're following what the various bodies that I've been talking about are doing and looking at how it's been used in the past, is that this would enable a more effective authoritarian enforcement of mandatory medical treatments.
Well, it really shocks me. I mean, I've been in touch with the widow of Lisa, her name now escapes, Lisa Shaw, former BBC producer, who on her death certificate identifies the AstraZeneca vaccine as having taken her life. She's left a little boy behind and a widowed husband. She would likely still be here if she hadn't been pressurised into taking this vaccine. And I do worry that this digital ID, as you say, will usher in a new era of medical authoritarianism. There's a couple of other issues, aren't there, on this one, Alex, which is that it will be very expensive. It's definitely going to impact our liberties, and it changes the relationship between citizen and state.
Absolutely. Very expensive, yes. I don't believe any of the figures that have been floating around so far. We only have to look at the NHS programme a couple of decades ago, which was many, many more times than that. You know, and the fact that government don't really know what they're doing yet. On the point about the state intervention, the thing that really freaked me out about the consultation was that it talked about a government service checker. Now, it said that where digital ID would be required for things like even, say, buying alcohol, it wouldn't be enough for a person to look at the ID, say, on a phone. They would have to run it through this government checker, effectively the computer. So what that means is that the state is authorising or not every single activity or purchase that is connected, linked to digital ID. So we absolutely don't want this.
It's outrageous. More power to you. Alex, I've only got a couple of seconds. Do you think this will see the light of day?
I don't think so, partly because it's chaotic and they don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Government that has announced restrictions on VPNs and then said they're not possible. Anyone who looks into this knows that that wouldn't be workable. And also because there's now a growing movement for alternatives to a digital rights movement, alternatives to digital processes, which I fully support. If you're interested in that, go to my Substack, Ways of Seeing. There's details on that new movement, which is coming into being. We all need to be insisting as free human beings that there are alternatives to digital processes.
Ways of Seeing on Substack, is that correct?
That's right.
Well, there you go, folks. Do take a look at that. An important resource and important work being conducted by Alex Klaushofer, who is a journalist and freedom campaigner who is saying no to digital ID. Head over to Substack and search Ways of Seeing. Lots more to come. Ed Miliband reportedly is going to be Foreign Secretary of this country. Does that mean that net zero has gone up in smoke? That's next.
We've got some breaking news that has just come in. TalkSport have announced a brand new partnership in a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We have a news update, and a Scottish university worker and trans activist has been charged over online posts about Anne Widdecombe's death. The ex-Conservative minister and TV star was found dead in her Dartmoor home last Wednesday. Of course, a very close friend of ours, a very important member of the Talk family. Heather Herbert was previously at the centre of a probe over the comments on social media. A Police Scotland spokesperson said, "We received reports on Saturday the 11th of July relating to a post made online. Following further assessment, a 50-year-old has been arrested and charged in connection with this. A report will be submitted to the Procurator Fiscal." We'll give you more on that as we get it. We are hearing that Ed Miliband will likely be Britain's next Foreign Secretary. What does that mean for net zero? Who better to ask than the brilliant journalist and broadcaster Ross Clark, who is the author of Not Zero: How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You, Help China, and Won't Even Save the Planet. Hello, Ross.
Hello, Mark. Hi.
Well, this seems to be politically significant, doesn't it? Andy Burnham appears to want Ed Miliband out of the way.
Well, it does seem that way in the past day or so. It seems to be that he's going to give the Chancellor's job to Shabana Mahmood and deprive Ed Miliband of his great ambition of becoming Chancellor. And there are a number of reasons for that. Burnham's cottoned on that Miliband is going to frighten markets. On the other hand, when it was revealed that Shabana Mahmood might be Chancellor, well, the market settled down a bit. The pound rose, the yields on government debt reduced a little bit. So, yeah, it's partly to do with market reaction, but also Andy Burnham has said he has an open mind about new drilling in the North Sea. Well, that's something that Ed Miliband has virtually totally ruled out. I mean, he was reported the other day in one last desperate push to get the Chancellor's job that maybe he would accept drilling for gas in the Jackdaw field in the North Sea, as a basically price of being allowed to be Chancellor. But it seems that Andy Burnham may have seen wisdom and decided he's best kept away from the levers of fiscal policy in this country.
Might this suggest, Ross, that an Andy Burnham administration would row back on net zero?
I think that would be going a little too far, but maybe they will soften their approach on in a number of issues, the North Sea being particularly one of them. And we've also the ambition to reach decarbonise the national grid by 2030, which is absolutely Ed Miliband's cherished policy. I mean, virtually nobody thinks that is possible anymore. Nobody thought it was ever possible apart from Ed Miliband and the National Energy Systems Operator, which Miliband employs to tell him that it's possible. So I think that probably will end up being watered down, but maybe not immediately. I think the government may cling on to that for a little while.
And of course, Shabana Mahmood is a great unknown when it comes to her attitude to the economy, to taxes, and to all the rest of it. We know what kind of Home Secretary she is, but we know nothing about her as a potential Chancellor.
No, we don't. We know nothing about Andy Burnham as a potential Prime Minister, of course. He's just the sort of, I think Andy Burnham is the sort of equivalent of the antithesis of George Orwell's Room 101. That was, what your greatest fear was contained in Room 101. I think for backbench Labour MPs, Andy Burnham represents everything they most dearly want. But of course, he can't please them all. He's going to cause mass disappointment among them all. But as regards Shabana Mahmood, no, she hasn't had a sort of a financial economic brief in the government before. We don't really know where she stands, other than she's sort of generally supposed to be on the right of the party and therefore might have a more realistic and sensible approach to fiscal reality than some of the other people who could be put in that position. And the real problem is that the government is up to its eyeballs in debt. It can't borrow anymore because the markets will do what they did when Liz Truss, tried to borrow more. We need massive cuts in public spending, really. It's very difficult to extract more tax revenues. The OECD yesterday was saying, reminding Britain, taxes in this country are too high. You can carry on putting taxes up. It doesn't mean you get more revenue if you're driving business and individuals overseas or forcing people to work less or, not sell their assets because they're going to be clobbered with capital gains tax. So, the only way ahead really is going to be serious cuts to public spending. That's the only thing that's going to save us from fiscal crisis. Will Shabana Mahmood be up to that? Well, we don't know yet, but hopefully she will.
Ross, fantastic to see you. We'll speak soon. Ross Clark, author of Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You, Help China and Won't Even Save the Planet. That's amazing. That's the book in one title. Well, let's throw the book at it. What do you think? Net zero, is it dying a slow death? Live in the studio from 1 o'clock is broadcasting legend, the only, the one, the brilliant Ian Collins.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you very much. Yes. No, what was the question?
Who knows? I think net zero is dying a slow death, to be honest.
It would be amazing. I think if Andy Burnham just came in and said, and I wouldn't even care if he said this, he said, right, OK, I've got lots of beliefs about the environment. I think net zero is very important, but we're going to put it on hold. We're going to put it on hold for 5 years or something like that. Can't afford it. We're not going to die. No one's going to shrivel up. We won't see fewer newts in your back garden. We'll put it on hold. I could buy into that a bit. Go, all right, fair enough. Because right now, that would be a great moment. What a way for Andy Burnham to start.
Absolutely.
He saves a load of money.